Chapter 170. Mo Jingshan walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, lifted his eyelids, and looked out. Qin Siding stood there and looked in the direction of the villa not far away. The villa was dark and without light. No one had returned, and the black carved door in front of the door had been quiet for a night. There was only a floor lamp on this side of the floor-to-ceiling window. Under the dim light, no one spoke, and there was a moment of silence. The whole world seemed to be quiet, except for a white cat jumping out of the high wall of the opposite villa, meowing softly in the darkness from time to time. Mo Jingshan put one hand in his trouser pocket, his calm, low, and cold voice particularly clear under the dim light. Back then, you disregarded your own safety to love her, and then hated her to death. Now that she has returned, you keep avoiding her. Tonight, you clearly want to continue acting like a stranger. What are you still standing here looking at? If she doesn't come back for a night, are you going to stand here and wait all night? Qin Siding, who had been meditating for a long time, finally moved, but he only turned to glance at him. Who the f***ck said I'm standing here to look at her? As though the oppressive peace of the night was finally broken, Qin Siding's brows were full of coldness. Do you think I'm the type to stand here and wait until dawn for such a woman? Mo Jingshan coldly said, her villa has been empty here for a few years, and you've moved here for a few years. You've been looking at an empty villa for so long, and now that the person who left has finally come back, she probably still doesn't know that you live across from her. Don't you know how long you've been standing here every day and night? Qin Siding, he abruptly turned to the sofa, picked up the cigarette that Nanheng had thrown on the coffee table, and lit it. After taking a few puffs to calm down, he coldly said, moving here was also a decision I made several years ago when I was ignorant and still immersed in the entanglement of love and hate. Now, I don't have any feelings for her. I'm just used to living here and can't be bothered to change places. Nanheng sneered as he puffed out the smoke. Is it because you're young and ignorant, or is it because you've lived for more than 20 years and only had feelings for such a woman? Even now, those women chasing after you all think you're not interested in women. In the end, who knew that your pure young man's heart had long been crushed by a woman and hasn't been pieced back together until now? Qin Siding was expressionless. The two of you came to my place in the middle of the night just to ridicule me for my stupid past. Nanheng smiled. I do have that intention, but I don't know why he came so late that night. I said he was kicked out of bed by Jin Wan, but he refused to admit it. Nanheng watched Mo Jingshan as he spoke. Mo Jingshan calmly said, I couldn't sleep, so I came to see how unhappy old Qin is. If he tells me, perhaps I'll be happy. Qin Siding, can't sleep. Qin Siding sneered. After taking a few puffs, he put out the cigarette. You two can't sleep, so you came here to watch me. Nanheng was laughing with a cigarette in his mouth. Mo Jingshan only coldly raised his brows. Indeed, he could not sleep. She was not kicked out of bed, nor did they quarrel. It was his woman who wanted to go to T City to study. She wanted to change her identity from Mrs. Mo to a business student at T University. Although she would only be studying for a few short months, it could be considered a temporary separation from him. This was clearly a decision she had made after the banquet that day. The little woman clearly dared to make this decision under the pretext of being drunk. Could he reject? He could, but he clearly could not. He could clearly feel that after Jin Wan's temperament changed several months ago, under the calm and mature surface, there was an indescribable vulnerability and sensitivity. She was extremely afraid of being separated by life and death. She was even more afraid of not being able to control her own life. She had more stubbornness in her bones, more things that she wanted to hold on to, but they were hidden very deeply. When Mo Jingshan returned, it was already close to dawn. The sky was still dark, but there were hints of white. He originally thought that Jean Wan was still asleep, but the little woman was tossing and turning on the bed. It was clear that she did not sleep well. It was only when he laid down by her side that she furrowed her brows and burrowed into his embrace, gradually calming down. Mo Jingshan stroked her hair. Headache. Jean Wan closed her eyes and nodded in his embrace. She was half asleep and dazed. She did not speak. Mo Jingshan's hand that had landed on her hair turned to gently massage her forehead. She did not move, allowing him to soothe the pain in her head. The little woman wore soft pajamas, her long hair scattered on the pillow on the bed. Her body was fragrant, and she leaned softly in his embrace. Her eyes were closed the entire time. She did not ask where he had gone and only instinctively snuggled into his embrace, unwilling to move away even a single inch. Mo Nwan Studio. The computer screen was filled with all sorts of messages that Xia Tian had sent her on MSN. Right now, Xia Tian could already walk normally with the help of a walking stick. She just needed to go through 3 months of rehabilitation. If she wanted to come to her studio to help, it would not be convenient for her to stay too far away. However, when Xia Tian studied with her in America, she studied at the University of Finance and Economics. She also specialized in financial analysis. Right now, the position of the finance manager in the studio was vacant. It just so happened that Xia Tian could come over to help her. This would save Jean Wan a lot of effort. The two of them were chatting in full swing when the intercom on the office desk suddenly rang. Jean Wan casually picked it up. Hello. CEOG, hello. There's a package for you here. The call came from the mail room on the first floor of Jean Lin Building. Jean Wan glanced at the caller ID and said, "All right, I'll be down in a moment." After hanging up, Jean Wan typed a few words on the keyboard. "Are you afraid that you'll have too many things after leaving the hospital, so you packed up your things and sent them to the studio?" Xia Tian replied, "No, I don't have many things. When I go, I'll just casually bring a suitcase to my place." Jean Wan raised her brows slightly. That was strange. Why would there suddenly be a package for her? In this year, the domestic e-commerce industry had just started. She didn't have the habit of buying things online, and she rarely sent things to others. Xiao Ba or her secretary were in charge of the letters or phone faxes she received in her studio. Xiao Ba didn't know what to do with Xiao Ba. Why would there be a package directly sent to her? Jean Wan directly went downstairs to the mail room on the first floor. The person inside handed her a square box that was not very large. Jean Wan saw that the box was wrapped tightly and could not tell what exactly was inside. Furthermore, there was only the address of the recipient and her name. There was no address or sender written on it. Who sent it? Jean Wan kept an eye out and asked. I'm not sure. Earlier, when I was tidying up the pile of boxes by the door, I discovered it. Chapter 171. Jean Wan took the package and entered the elevator. The moment she returned to the office, Feng Ling glanced at the box in her hands. What is it? I just received the package. I don't know what's inside, Jean Wan said as she prepared to enter. However, Feng Ling's expression turned solemn. She immediately became wary and turned to enter the office with her. As they walked, she said, I'll open it for you. Stand further away. Jean Wan faltered. She was about to say that it was fine and that it was just a package. However, she saw that Feng Ling had already carried the box to the office table. Knowing how responsible and cautious Feng Ling was usually, she smiled and teased, all right, then go ahead and open it. Be careful. Don't let it be something like a bomb. As she spoke, Feng Ling had already opened the waterproof bag and opened the box. She lowered her eyes to see what was inside and paused. She then turned back to look at Jinwan. What is it? Jinwan walked over and lowered her head to see that there was actually a medium-sized doll in the box. The doll was dressed in a white wedding dress and was very beautiful and adorable. Why is it a doll? Who would send me something like this? See. Jinwan reached out to pick up the doll. However, the moment her hand touched the doll, a sharp pain spread from her palm. She softly cried out in pain as blood flowed down her palm and fingers, dripping onto the doll's wedding dress. Be careful. Feng Ling quickly pulled Jinwan's hand away and kicked the package onto the ground. Jinwan turned back and stared in shock at the doll that had instantly shattered into pieces. She ignored the pain in her palm and stared at the doll that appeared to be simply pieced together in the box. However, when it was placed in the box, it had already been dismembered. The floor was also littered with blades. The doll's wedding dress was dyed red by Jinwan's blood. The dismembered head and limbs, as well as the blood-stained wedding dress, were a ghastly sight. Are you all right? Feng Ling coldly stared at the doll that had turned from adorable to frightening. She immediately grabbed Jinwan's hand and saw that her fingers and palm had been slashed to varying degrees by the blades. I'm fine. Jinwan shook her head. The pain in her palm was not too serious, but the blade had cut deep and caused more blood to flow. She then turned to look at the doll on the ground. Her eyebrows moved slightly as she fell into deep thought. Whose prank was this? Or did someone else have other intentions? After confirming that Jinwan was standing at a safe distance, she walked over, bent down, and untied the blood-stained wedding dress on the doll. Only then did she see the blades stabbed into the doll's body. There were also many blades hidden in the wedding dress. They were very small and very sharp. Jinwan stared at the blades and then at her hands thoughtfully. After checking, Feng Ling stood up and said, "The cuts on your hands are very deep. Go to the hospital to stop the bleeding and bandage them first." Jinwan nodded and turned to glance at the express delivery box. Feng Ling seemed to understand her and went over to tear off the receipt. As they walked out of the office, Xiao Ba happened to pass by. Seeing Jinwan's hand, she immediately cried out, "Oh my god, Boss Nguyen, what's wrong with your hand? Why is there so much blood?" Jinwan indicated for Feng Ling to pass the receipt to Xiao Ba. Go to this delivery company and ask them to find out where this package came from. If they don't do it, call the police to complain. Xiao Ba received it in a daze and then nodded. All right, but Boss Nguyen, your hand, it's fine. It's just some blood. Don't make a fuss. Jinwan did not say more and headed out. Let's go to Dr. Chin's hospital. It's not far from here, Feng Ling said as she pushed open the door. Jinwan was still thinking about why the doll was wearing a wedding dress and did not say more. When they got into the car, Jinwan saw Feng Ling's serious expression. After thinking for a moment, she said, "It's my fault for being careless. Besides, these are all superficial wounds. Don't tell Jing Xin, in case he worries." Feng Ling was about to drive when she turned back to look at her. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have opened the box and seen a doll. Mr. Mo will find out about this sooner or later. There's no way to hide it. Let's go to the hospital first. We'll talk after Xiao Ba finds the results." Jinwan lowered her eyes to look at her hand. Feng Ling did not say more and turned to drive. Hospital. Qin Siding helped Jinwan apply medicine on her palm while saying mockingly, "Do you really think I'm an all-purpose doctor? I'm in the internal medicine department. Even an external wound has to be treated by me. How did you end up like this in the studio? How exactly did you injure yourself?" Feng Ling stood by Jinwan's side and did not speak. Earlier, when Jean Wan saw Qin sighting, she finally diverted some attention and paid special attention to his expression. He still had that sly smile on his face, as though nothing had happened in Zijingqing Club. Be gentler. Jean Wan felt a piercing pain in her palm. She abruptly cried out softly, "Are you going to directly press the alcohol cotton into my wound? Can't you see that the 2 wounds on my palm are very deep? Can't you be gentler?" Qin sighting sneered. "Endure it." Jean Wan, she abruptly raised her head to look at Feng Ling. Earlier, she had said that she would directly find a doctor from the trauma department to disinfect and bandage her wound. However, Feng Ling insisted on bringing her to Dr. Qin. It was as though aside from Dr. Qin, no one else was reliable. "You don't need to look at Feng Ling. She was heavily injured during a mission in America and almost lost her little life. It was me who brought her back from the gates of hell. She is very stubborn. In this world, aside from me, no one else can be called a doctor in her eyes." Qin sighting spoke indifferently and then used the alcohol cotton to wipe Jean Wan's fingers. When Jean Wan once again clenched her teeth in pain, he coldly asked, "Does it hurt that much?" "When my hand was injured, I didn't feel much pain. Don't put salt in the alcohol, it hurts like hell," Jean Wan said as she retracted her hand. "Is it done?" "It's more or less fine. There's no need to bandage it. The injury on your palm is more serious. It needs to be bandaged. Your fingers are fine. You just need to apply some medicine to disinfect it." Qin sighting's voice was mild. "For the next few days, be careful not to touch water in case it gets infected." Jean Wan nodded. Qin sighting placed the rest of the alcohol cotton on the shelf by the side. He then turned to look at her. "Your hand is injured to this extent. Have you told your man?" "I'll tell him when I return tonight." Chapter 172. After Feng Ling left, Jean Wan turned to Qin sighting. "Aren't we not on the same side? Why did you suddenly send her away? Do you wish for more people to hear about your Ji family's matters?" Qin sighting glanced at her indifferently. He casually took out a medicine analysis report that was thicker than the previous one and handed it to her. Jean Wan was about to reach out to receive it when Qin sighting suddenly paused. He placed the analysis report by her side. "Forget it. It's better if you don't move your hand." Jean Wan lowered her head to look at the report before raising her eyes to look at him. "What's the result?" "It's about the same as your initial guess. This so-called healthcare medicine brought back from abroad has not been found to contain any toxic ingredients. It can be seen that the other party has been very careful. However, if these medicines are taken together, it will become a chronic poison that can cause kidney failure." Qin sighting's tone was cold. Jean Wan was silent for a moment. She had already expected this. Now that she heard the result, she was not surprised. "My father shouldn't have taken this medicine for too long. I've seen the medicine in his drawer. He only takes it occasionally when he thinks of it. Could it have already affected his body?" "That depends on your father's usual dosage. This is a drug formula that is very slow and hard to detect. If he doesn't take it for a long time, it will at most cause his body's resistance to weaken, and he will easily fall sick. As long as he stops taking the medicine, he will be fine after a while of rest and detoxification. However, if he takes it for too long, the medicine will be like a frog being boiled in warm water. It will unknowingly seep into his blood and into his bones, causing him to be unable to reverse the situation." Jean Wan stared at him, her expression cold and solemn. After a long while, she slowly and softly said, "Thank you. I've troubled you, Dr. Qin." Qin sighting smiled and glanced at the analysis report by her hand. "It's a good thing that you've already discovered this matter. It's not hard to see that the other party is an extremely meticulous person. If you want to expose this matter, you still have to put in some effort. Otherwise, it's easy to fall into the other party's trap and dig your own grave. Jin-Wan nodded and did not speak. Qin Siding didn't bother with her anymore and let her sit by the side to wait for Feng Ling to return with the medicine. About 2 minutes later, Qin Siding sat at the desk in the consultation room and drank some water. He suddenly asked, "Is your stepmother's ex-husband the sickly man from the Xing family who died early?" Jin-Wan had investigated Shinharu's matter, but she did not expect Qin Siding to know about it as well. "What do you want to ask?" Qin Siding glanced back at her. "Xing Yihan is her son. Even if they severed their relationship because of the Ji family many years ago, your stepmother used to rely on the Xing family. It's still unknown whether she and her son have really severed their relationship completely." "Xing Yihan is her son," Xing Yihan said with a smile. Jin-Wan looked at him. "Do you mean that the medicine you gave my father might have something to do with Xing Yihan?" Qin Siding smiled mildly. "It's not impossible, but Xing Yihan is cunning and good at hiding. This person seems too calm and unfathomable. Your stepmother is a woman in her 50s after all. A woman like her who rarely shows her face outside is very suitable to live a stable life in the Ji family. If something happens to your father, the Ji family's power in her hands won't be of much use. Unless there's someone behind her." It went without saying that although Shinharu was smart, she was not smart to the point where she could handle things so cautiously. Qin Siding did not say more. His words clearly did not go overboard. When Feng Ling returned, Qin Siding coincidentally had a specialist consultation to attend. After explaining a few words about Jin-Wan's hand injury, he left. Only the two of them were left in the consultation room. Jin-Wan was preparing to leave the hospital when her phone suddenly rang. "Hello, Boss Nwan, I've checked. The package was sent from Los Angeles in America. I can only find the address of the package, but there's no contact person. There's no other information. There's no information about the sender at all. There's nothing at all. I can't find anything at all." The delivery company said that many people don't write an address when sending things, only leaving their name and phone number. However, this package seems to have a problem. There's actually no name or phone number. They also find it strange. America. Why did she feel that she was closely related to many things in America recently? Yet, she did not know what was going on. Regardless of whether it was her previous life or this life, Jin-Wan was certain that she did not suffer from amnesia. She remembered everything that had happened since she was young. She had only gone to school in Los Angeles a few years ago. Was there anything she didn't know? To send a doll in a wedding gown, and a dismembered doll at that, the motive was clear. However, since it was sent from America, it should have nothing to do with Ji Mengran. Although Shuyan had returned to America in the past few days, with Shuyan's personality, even if the proud and arrogant young lady of the Yin family was smart and had some tricks up her sleeves, she would not have done such a thing. If Shuyan was such a vicious and violent person, she would have displayed it in the country and would not have returned to America so easily. This kind of method did not seem like something Imo Jingshan's father would do. This method was clearly done by a woman. Who exactly was it? At night, Feng Ling sent Jin-Wan back to the Yu Garden. Unexpectedly, Mo Jingshan returned at almost the same time as her. She had just alighted from the car when his car stopped outside the Yu Garden. When Jin-Wan alighted from the car, she subconsciously placed her hands behind her back. She turned to look at the black ghost. Without waiting for Mo Jingshan to alight, she headed straight for the villa. Mo Jingshan was talking on the phone in the car. When he saw Jin-Wan's suspicious behavior, he hung up the phone and alighted. He closed the door and walked over. In the end, Jean Wan was in too much of a rush. When she reached the villa, her hand was wrapped in gauze and could not open the door. When she felt Emo Jinxian approaching, her scalp immediately turned numb. Did you do something shameful? You don't even dare to raise your head. Emo Jinxian's voice rang from above Jean Wan's head. Jean Wan quickly took a step back, moving away from the man to the side. It's nothing. I'm just a little tired today. Why did you get off work so early? Don't you have a business dinner tonight? As Jean Wan spoke, she quietly leaned against the door. By the time her last word landed, Auntie Chen had already heard the commotion and opened the door from inside. Chapter 173. Jean Wan was rooted to the spot. The sound of the handmade Italian shoes on the ground was steady and powerful, but in Jean Wan's ears, it carried an ominous signal. She had just adjusted her expression and was about to reveal a smile as though nothing had happened when she felt a slightly cold finger on her shoulder. Hand, stretch out, Emo Jinxian calmly said. Jean Wan stared at him without moving. The man's expression gradually turned cold. After staring at her for a long time, he suddenly chuckled coldly. How long do you think you can hide it? Jean Wan sighed heavily in her heart. She really did not want to tell him that she had accidentally caused trouble because of her carelessness today. It was really too embarrassing. She subconsciously took a step back, wanting to use Auntie Chen's presence to enter first. Come here. Emo Jinxian's voice was heavy. Jean Wan was helpless and could only walk over with her head lowered. Emo Jinxian lowered his eyes to watch her. She paused for a moment and then saw that Feng Ling was still outside the Yew Garden. She guessed that there was no way to continue hiding this matter and could only stretch out the two hands behind her back. Emo Jinxian lowered his eyes to look at her bandaged palms and slightly swollen fingers. He directly grabbed her wrist and strode into the villa. Auntie Chen saw his cold expression and did not dare to approach to speak. Just like that, Jean Wan was brought up the stairs and into the room. It's just a superficial wound. I didn't tell Feng Ling to tell you because I didn't want you to worry. Besides, I've already gone to the hospital to deal with it. It'll be fine as long as it doesn't touch water for a few days. Don't get angry. Jean Wan knew that Emo Jinxian was clearly in the calm before the storm. She could only not give up on any opportunity to ease his mood and kept explaining. Emo Jinxian did not respond. He pushed open the bedroom door and brought her in. Go in. I'm in a bad mood right now. Don't make me repeat myself. Jean Wan's thousands of words were stuck on the tip of her tongue. She could only enter the bedroom. The moment the door was closed, she turned back to see that Emo Jinxian's expression was indeed very unkind. Explain, he coldly spat out these two words. Let me say this first. Don't blame Feng Ling. She's very dutiful. It's all my fault. I told her not to tell you, Jean Wan said helplessly. Emo Jinxian took off his coat and threw it to the side. His movements were not gentle as he tugged at his collar button, speaking to Jean Wan in a heavy voice. Don't be in a hurry to cover up for others. Since you asked her to hide it from me, you should tell me the truth. How did your hand get hurt so badly after less than 10 hours in the studio? Jean Wan had no choice but to truthfully tell him everything that happened today. When she saw the man's gaze turn sharper when he heard about the dismembered doll in the wedding dress, she quickly recounted how she was taken to the hospital by Feng Ling and went to Qin Sighting's place to treat her wounds. Her purpose was to let him know that Feng Ling was really responsible for her and that he shouldn't vent his anger on Feng Ling because of such a small matter. The source of the package, have you checked? Emo Jinxian's tone softened. However, rather than saying it softened, it was more accurate to say that there was an unexplainable danger hidden within. Feng Ling is so obedient to you right now. She even dared to hide such a thing from me. It seems like it's time to find a new person by your side. Don't. This matter really can't be blamed on her. She knew that no matter what, I would come back at night. You would find out about this sooner or later. I only asked her to hide it for a few hours. After all, you were in the company during the day. I didn't want you to be distracted, Jin-won explained. Seeing that Jin-won was busy protecting Feng-ling and considering whether he would be distracted at the company, yet she did not care much about her own safety, Mo Jingshin seemed to smile. However, Jin-won could not determine if he was smiling or sneering. She could only hear the slightest hint of a smile in his tone. However, it made her worry endlessly if Feng-ling would be punished because of this matter. Worry about yourself first. Mo Jingshin looked at her, his tone cold. Jin-won paused and could only say, that was an international package. We only managed to find out that it was sent from America. All of the sender's information was hidden. Where's the serial number? It's in my phone's photo album. I took a photo. Mo Jingshin took her cell phone, opened it, took a look, and sent the photo with the odd number to his cell phone. Go sit down first. Mo Jingshin glanced at her again. Seeing his expression, Jin-won felt that it was best not to offend him. She obediently sat down by the bed. Seeing that she was obedient, Mo Jingshin's expression finally softened. He closed the door and left. Half an hour later, Shinmu returned Mo Jingshin's call. CEO Mo, I've checked. This international package's serial number has indeed been hidden. The sender must have paid a large sum of money to the Los Angeles delivery company. Usually, when things are sent from America to the country, the American customs aren't particularly strict. Coupled with the fact that there's a human factor, it was successfully sent to the country. Since it's been hidden, it means that there's still a way to find out, Mo Jingshin said coldly. Yes, I've contacted the people in Los Angeles. After a special investigation, they only managed to find the sender's surname. What's the surname? Su. Hearing this surname, Mo Jingshin's calm gaze abruptly turned cold under the light. Her hand was injured, but there were some benefits. For example, Qin's sighting had instructed her not to bend or move her hand for the next 2 days, and not to touch water for the next 5 days. Thus, when Jin-won was having dinner, Auntie Qin would send the prepared food up. She would sit by the table, and Mo Jingshin would personally feed her. Open your mouth. Ah. Open your mouth. Ah. Seeing how badly injured her hand was, she kept winking and smiling as she ate, as though she was very proud of being personally fed by him. Mo Jingshin tossed the chopsticks onto the table and picked up the spoon to feed her a mouthful of soup. Jin-won pursed her lips and gulped it down. She then looked at Mo Jingshin's serious appearance as he fed her. It was as though he was afraid of scalding her. When she drank the soup, he kept staring at her mouth. He had already blown on it and it was not scalding at all, but he was still overly careful. Jin-won smiled, almost laughing out loud. She sat by the table and placed her hands on her lap, like an obedient primary school student receiving Boss Mo's feeding. You're still smiling. You didn't place a bomb in the package and cripple your hand, did you? Mo Jingshin stuffed another mouthful of soup into her mouth. I just feel very happy being fed by you. With a husband to dote on me, who wouldn't be happy? Jin-won was in a good mood. Chapter 174. He stuffed a mouthful of egg into Jin-won's mouth. She chewed and mumbled, such an experience is hard to come by. How do you feel? Not much. I feel like I have a daughter. Mo Jingshin picked up another small piece of vegetable and fed it to her without waiting for her to speak. If we have a daughter in the future, you'll most likely spoil her to the heavens. Mo Jingshan's handsome brows rose slightly. Why don't we have one now? Jean Wan took a sip of the soup he fed her and swallowed before saying, I'll consider it after I return from Tea City. Speaking of Tea City, Mo Jingshan calmly said, the Tea University professor that your father introduced is indeed someone with a long history in the country. He has taught many business managers, but there are many students who are attracted by his fame. There are already 40 to 50 students in his class. Are you sure you can adapt to this kind of learning environment? Jean Wan did not know when he had investigated that professor. She raised her eyes. You even investigated a professor. How worried are you about me? Tea City isn't close to High City. If I don't even understand the situation there, how can I let you go with ease? Mo Jingshan saw that she had eaten her fill and casually placed the cutlery down. He picked up a napkin and wiped the corner of her mouth. Then, does this mean you're agreeing? Do I have to wait a few days for that professor to start a new class at Tea University? Jean Wan's expression was filled with anticipation. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. I can invite all the outstanding lecturers to High City to give you a month of tutoring. If 1 month isn't enough, then 2. It's the same even if you study at home. Jean Wan knew that Mo Jingshan would not easily agree to let her go to Tea City. No matter how outstanding the lecturers are, it won't feel good if they only teach me. Based on my age, if I hadn't studied in America in my early years, I should have just started university. Tea University is one of the top business universities in the country. It's better to study in such a place. That professor of yours will be teaching for at least 3 months. Are you sure you won't return to High City for 3 months? Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. It's only been 3 months. Just treat it as sending me to Tea City to further my studies. Don't your company often have people who need to study abroad to supplement their knowledge? 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. What's more, wasn't long-distance relationships popular in recent years? The two of us haven't experienced the joys and sorrows of a long-distance relationship before we got married. This time, we can experience it. Jean Wan smiled with interest. Mo Jingshan sneered coldly. Who's in a long-distance relationship with you? Sweet, sour, bitter and spicy. You think too much. Jean Wan. It's not romantic at all. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Mo Jingshan was expressionless. In my eyes, we're still newlyweds. There's no need to use a small separation to make us feel better. Jean Wan choked. She wanted to argue back, but Mo Jingshan did not plan to continue this topic. He signaled for her to stand up with his eyes. Get up first. You've just eaten, and it's not easy to digest. Walk around the room for a while. I'll go prepare water for you to bathe. After saying that, the man turned around and entered the bathroom. Jean Wan, she didn't know when it started, but Mo Jingshan was becoming more and more skilled at taking care of her. After the argument at night, no, it couldn't be considered an argument. At the very least, Mo Jingshan's attitude was ambiguous. He wasn't sure if he would let her go or not. Furthermore, he was always cold towards this matter. Jean Wan's hands were bandaged. When she sat in the bathtub, her clothes had already been removed. Mo Jingshan half supported and half carried her into the water. She had been too busy in the studio during the day, and in the afternoon, she had been frightened by the delivery. She had been too focused the entire day, and the moment she sat in the warm water, she couldn't control her eyelids and felt drowsy. Afterward, she didn't know why she fell asleep in the bathtub. She leaned against the side of the bathtub, but the water that splashed against her body made her unable to sleep well. She opened her eyes occasionally and saw the man's figure. The sense of security she felt when she was by Mo Jingshan's side caused her to close her eyes and not open them again. Mo Jingshan looked at her face that was flushed red from the hot water. It was white and rosy, clean and charming. His heart was indescribably soft, and his eyes softened. His lips curved slightly. Don't sleep. It's easy to catch a cold if you sleep in the water. Mo Jingshan pinched her cheeks. He did not plan on letting her fall asleep in the bathtub. Jin Wan furrowed her brows and pushed his hand away. She leaned her head against the outside of the bathtub, leaning against his shoulder. Mo Jingshan did not force her. He helped her wash her body, wrapped her in a towel, and carried her out of the bathtub. His long legs moved, and he walked out of the bathroom. Looking at the tired face of the woman in his arms, his brows furrowed slightly. You're so tired. Don't go to the studio tomorrow. Coincidentally, your hand also needs to rest at home for a few days. Be good and stay at home. Jin Wan rubbed against his chest, saying vaguely, No, the studio is currently lacking manpower. If I don't go, everyone will be even busier. You know the studio is lacking manpower, yet you still want to leave for T-City? That's different. If I really leave, Xia Tian will come and help me. Jin Wan rubbed her head against his chest again, saying softly and lazily, I really want to go. I didn't say that you can't go. Let your hand recover first. Mo Jingshan carried her to the bedside. Jin Wan did not open her eyes. Just like that, she snuggled in his embrace. Her voice was half asleep and half awake. I want to work hard. I want to work harder than before. Mo Jingshan's gaze deepened. He watched the little woman in his arms and placed her on the bed. As soon as she touched the bed, Jin Wan consciously found a comfortable position on the bed. She then raised her forearm to her nose and sniffed it. She said fawningly, Thank you, hubby, for bathing me. It makes me smell so good. In order to get him to agree, this little woman really thought of ways to coax him. Mo Jingshan snorted, throwing the blanket over her. Don't move your hand around. Put it down properly. Hurry and sleep. Jin Wan was really sleepy. She wrapped her arms around the blanket and fell asleep comfortably. The next day, when Jin Wan woke up, she realized that she had woken up late. Her originally packed schedule for the studio was now gone. After making a call, she found out that Mo Jingshan had transferred someone from his company over to help her organize the various affairs in the studio. After confirming that all the work she had arranged was not delayed, Jin Wan finally relaxed and laid back on the bed. This man, Mo Jingshan, usually did not say much, but he always did everything well. Everything regarding her was handled exceptionally well. Chapter 175. Since she was told to rest, she would rest. Jin Wan directly went to the hospital to fetch Xia Tian, who was about to be discharged. In the end, because she could not hold anything with her hands, Xia Tian rolled her eyes at her. What's the use of keeping you? Jin Wan had already found a new place for Xia Tian to stay in. After all, Xia Tian was purely here to help and did not want any benefits. Although this Xia family's young lady had left home, she did not lack money. The only thing Jin Wan could do was to help her arrange everything so that she would not have to run around too much during her recovery. On the way to Xia Tian's new place, Xia Tian could not stop scolding her. Look at you. How can you injure your hand so badly just to receive a package? Doesn't your Mo Jingshan's heart ache? Even if my heart aches, what can I do? I can only blame myself for being too careless. Jin Wan remembered that Qin Sighting had said yesterday that the bandage would only last for a day. After that, she just had to apply medicine on her hand on time every day. Thus, as she slowly removed the bandage with some difficulty, she briefly explained to Xia Tian about the package she received yesterday. Xia Tian listened for a while. Initially, because there were outsiders in the taxi, she did not speak. After alighting from the car, Xia Tian asked the person helping her with her luggage to enter first. She looked at Jin Wan from outside and asked, "This package is clearly a love rival trying to scare you. Who is so bold as to send this kind of thing to your studio? Isn't this blatant provocation?" As she spoke, Xia Tian turned around to look at Jin Wan seriously. "Apart from that and Shu Yan, who else do you know about your love rival?" Jin Wan could not help but think for a moment, and the word love rival was raised. Since it's a package from America, this matter should have nothing to do with Ji Mengran. As for America, Jin Wan hesitated for a moment. "Apart from Shu Yan, I really don't know who else." Xia Tian's expression was one of exasperation. "Who else is eyeing your husband, this piece of meat? You actually don't know? Do you know if Imo Jingshan has any other women in the country or abroad?" "I'm not too sure. There are only some rumors, but I can't confirm whether it's true or not." Xia Tian rolled her eyes. "You don't even know about such things. Nuan, how much do you trust him?" Imo Jingshan was a man that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. How many women were eyeing him? How many women wanted to sleep with him? You're not even on guard. But I trust him. Trust my ass. Now, your love rival has thrown a knife right in front of you. This time, it's a dismembered doll wearing a wedding dress and a blade. He's trying to scare and curse you. Who knew what would happen next time? You have to investigate this matter thoroughly. Imo Jingshan had been in America for so long. To him, and Shu Yan was only a woman his father wanted to force onto him. Perhaps he didn't care about Shu Yan, but did he not have any other women? Or other women who were eyeing Imo Jingshan covetously? Sending such a doll in a wedding dress, it is obvious that she has a deep grudge against your marriage. If this isn't the provocation of a love rival, what else can it be? All right. Hurry up and go in. You're giving me goosebumps." Xia Tian refused to go in and continued to speak outside the door. "No matter how well Imo Jingshan treats you, he is still a grown man. Before you got married, he must have had his first love, right?" "I don't know." Xia Tian was about to be angered by her. Nuan, I'm telling you, if you continue to be so careless, you won't even know which woman will rush to his bed in the future. Imo Jingshan is the Adonis of many unmarried girls in Haicheng and even in the country. He is now the CEO of the Imo Corporation and the only grandson of the Imo family. In the future, if he goes to America to inherit shine, women will rush to him like carps crossing the river. If you don't guard against them, you won't be able to chase them away even if you hold a fly swatter in front of him. Jin Wan, you've always had a grudge against this marriage, but that's in the past. Now that you want to be with Imo Jingshan, you have to fully understand his past. Otherwise, what will you do if something like this happens again? Your love rival has already sent such a thing to you, but you don't even know who the other party is. The enemy is in the dark, and you're in the light. You're at a disadvantage. Xia Tian tugged at her earnestly. Jin Wan pulled Xia Tian into the residence and said, "I've long known that there will be many women who like him. Not only in America, but in Haicheng, there are many rich young ladies who can't stand me and wish I would disappear as soon as possible. But those who dare to threaten you so openly must have a close relationship with him. I know that Imo Jingshan has always been very indulgent toward you. Speaking of which, is your sexual life harmonious?" Xia Tian suddenly asked. Jin Wan pursed her lips. Forget it. Although your hand is injured, your rosy cheeks clearly indicate that you've been moisturized in various ways. From the way I see it, Imo Jingshan is really attentive toward you. If it was any other woman who has thoughts about Imo Jingshan, they would most likely be jealous to the heavens and explode from anger. Serves you right. How dare you harbor such thoughts toward a married man? Heaven will punish you if you're cheap. Nuan Nuan, you have to remember. Right now, Mo Jingshan is yours, but there are too many people who want to snatch away this piece of meat. You have to hold on to him tightly. Don't let him disappear. Jin Wan rolled her eyes. I'm still fine. Why are you complaining about it? I'm reminding you. Be careful that you don't even know when your meat is snatched away by a wolf. 3 days later, Jin Wan's hand wounds had healed. Except for the 2 deep wounds on her palms, which couldn't come into contact with water, she could now move her hands normally. However, the skin on her palms needed some time to recover. The professor at T University would be starting classes next week. Jin Wan had to return to settle Shinharu's matter first. In her previous life, she was unable to prevent her father's organs from failing. In this life, she definitely could not let Shinharu's evil scheme succeed. Jin Wan first gave Ji Hongwen a call, saying that she would return. In the evening, when she arrived at the Ji home, she saw Ji Mengran standing by the living room door angrily. Jin Wan met Ji Mingran's gaze. Jin Wan's expression was calm. Only Ji Mingran's face was filled with anger. She was so agitated that she abruptly stepped out to block Jin Wan's path. Jin Wan. You actually have the guts to return to the Ji home. What do you mean by this? Previously, you left me in that kind of place and almost caused me to lose half my life. You're so sinister and vicious, and now you're pretending to be a good person in front of Dad. You always say one thing to my face and another behind my back. How can you be so disgusting? Chapter 176. Sinister and Vicious. Who are you talking about? Compared to you, how am I worthy of those words? You bribed a psychiatrist to prescribe medicine that would cause your own sister to become mentally weak. If you could even do such a thing, who could be more sinister than you? Taking advantage of my unstable emotions, you encouraged me to divorce every day and even encouraged me to commit suicide to chase Mo Jingshan away. Who could be more vicious than you? Jin Wan mercilessly retorted. Because Ji Hongwen had already walked to Ji Mingran's back, his words were clear and cold, not giving in at all. As expected, after hearing these words, Ji Mingran's face turned pale. However, she immediately became bold and confident. You don't have any evidence. What right do you have to push all the blame onto me? How would I know what kind of medicine the doctor prescribed you? After all, you're the one who needs to see a psychiatrist. The one who's sick is you, not me. Who knows if there's something wrong with your brain, causing you to have delusions. Ji Mengran angrily said, furthermore, you didn't commit suicide. When did I encourage you to commit suicide? Do you have evidence? Do you have witnesses? It's all your imagination. Don't try to frame me. Thinking back to her previous life when she fell into the bathtub due to excessive blood loss and had no strength to get up, Jin Wan wanted to slap Ji Mingran's face. Jin Wan's gaze was cold and cold. If you don't want me to slap you, scram. A good dog doesn't block the door. Who are you scolding? Previously at the Mo family, I didn't fall out with you in front of everyone because of Dad. Right now, I'm not in the mood to bicker with you. Scram. Ji Mengran stood by the door, refusing to budge. You still want to hit me? This is the Ji family home. Without Mo Jingshan to support you, let's see if you dare to hit. Paw. Without hesitation, Jin Wan gave her a slap. Ji Mengran stiffened. She immediately reached out to grab Jin Wan's hair with an unwilling expression. Jin Wan dodged aside. If not for the injury on her hand, her slap would have been even heavier. Seeing that Ji Mengran was about to go crazy and fight with Jin Wan, Ji Hongwen, who had been listening for a long time, suddenly said coldly, "Enough. Why are you making a scene in front of our house?" Ji Mengran abruptly stiffened. She turned back and met Ji Hongwen's gaze. Her eyes were filled with panic. "Dad, it's Jin Wan," she. Ji Hongwen didn't even look at her. He only looked at Jin Wan. "Come in first." After entering the door, Ji Hongwen asked, "What's going on? You and Mengran haven't seen eye to eye recently. What she did last time was indeed out of line, but is what you just said true?" "Dad, Jin Wan has wronged me. Don't listen to her nonsense." Ji Mengran frantically tried to explain. "You saw how I looked when I came back that day. I was drenched in the rain for an entire night. I was cold and battered, and I almost died outside. She's obviously the one who's starting to hurt her own sister." "Shut up." Ji Hongwen looked at her coldly and angrily. He couldn't stand her nonsense. Ji Mengran gritted her teeth and glared at Jin Wan. It was clear that she had been frightened outside that night. Jin Wan coldly glanced at her. "You don't have to be so paranoid. I will indeed tell Dad everything you've done. You won't be able to defend yourself. I didn't do anything. Don't slander me." Jin Wan did not continue arguing with her. She calmly said, "Dad, I came back today because I have something to tell you. We can talk about Mingran's matter later. Let's talk business first." Ji Hongwen furrowed his brows. Seeing Jin Wan's serious expression, he asked, "What is it? Did something happen? Let's go to your study to talk." Jin Wan was about to head upstairs. "Jin Wan, if there's anything you want to say, just say it here. Don't think of going behind my back to talk bad about me in front of Dad. I'll admit to everything I've done. You can't accuse me of anything I didn't do." Ji Mengran reached out to push Jin Wan. Right now, Jin Wan had no intention of taking Ji Mingran's matter seriously. She did not retreat after being pushed. Instead, she raised her hand to pull Ji Mingran's wrist away, throwing her harshly to the side. She turned to look at her. "Do you think the entire world revolves around you? Do you think Dad and I have to talk about you when we're alone? Who do you think you are? Do you really think you're a dog with just a few plasters on your face?" Shenharu heard the commotion and walked out. Seeing Jin Wan's fierce expression, she walked over with a smile. "Nuan Nuan ah, why are you throwing such a big tantrum the moment you come back? A few days ago, Mingran's phone was smashed because of you, right? As an older sister, you're really too insensible. Now that you're Mrs. Mo, you're really capable. You dare to be unreasonable with your own younger sister, throwing a tantrum so easily. If the Ji family can't tolerate you, no one is begging you to come back. Why did you make such a ruckus the moment you came back? The Ji family is usually quiet, but the moment you entered, you caused such a ruckus." Jin Wan's gaze was cold and distant. She did not pay any attention to Shinharu, who was like a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. She only calmly looked at Ji Mengran. "Your weak and pitiful appearance can only fool others at home. Don't disgust others in front of me. Don't you know why your phone was smashed? You circled around half of Hai Qing just to follow me. My bodyguard did her job well. She thought you had ulterior motives and only smashed your phone but didn't punch you. That's already because you saw the word Ji in your name. You still have the cheek to make a ruckus at home." Jin Wan's words were spoken directly in front of Ji Hongwen and Shinharu. Ji Mengran instantly appeared as though she was facing a great enemy. Her eyes were filled with unconcealable panic. "That day, I was only passing by. What right do you have to conclude that I was the one following you? It's clear that you don't like me and intentionally had your bodyguard threaten me. If that bodyguard of yours dared to hit me, if I don't sue her entire family and send them to jail, my surname won't be G. Jinwon coldly smiled. Look at your face right now. You have a guilty conscience. Although your mouth is shouting loudly, your eyes have long betrayed you. Ji Hongwen did not speak. His brows were furrowed as he stared at his second daughter. Sensing her father's gaze, Ji Mengran finally restrained herself. That night, she was truly provoked by Jinwon to the point where she wanted to kill her. Now that she saw Jinwon, the hatred in her heart grew even stronger and did not lessen in the slightest. Yet, Jinwon remained indifferent. Even the politeness she displayed on the surface was completely retracted. She was making it clear that she wanted to tear her apart. Dad, don't believe her. Ji Mengran lowered her voice. Chapter 177. The sound of the teacup shattering caused Ji Mengran to take a step back in fright. The boiling hot tea gradually dripped onto her slippers, and the shattered cup scattered on the ground. Ji Mengran raised her eyes in disbelief. You only listen to Jinwon's words and won't listen to my explanation. Do I still need an explanation? Ji Hongwen's expression was cold. You're my biological daughter. Do you think I don't know your personality? Back then, you threw a tantrum at me because of Jinwon's marriage to Mo Jingshan. From then on, I knew you had feelings for your brother-in-law. On account of the fact that you're my biological daughter, I gave you some face and didn't expose you. Now, you're the one causing trouble. You can't blame anyone. Ji Mengran appeared as though she had heard a joke. Since you know what I'm thinking, you still gave all the things I like to Jinwon. Is there anyone as biased as you? Ji Hongwen's expression was instantly enraged. Since young, whatever you liked or what Jinwon liked, as long as you opened your mouth, she would unconditionally give it to you. Your two daughters have been spoiled by me. She is indeed arrogant outside and is often criticized by others, but she only treats you, her younger sister. Whatever you want, she will give it to you. What else do you want? Is it because you're used to snatching things from Jinwon's hands? Now that she refuses to give her legal husband to you, are you going to become enemies with her? As he spoke, Ji Hongwen angrily pointed at the pale Ji Mengran. You still have the cheek to stand here and cause a ruckus. You unfilial daughter, kneel down. Me? Kneel down. Ji Mengran glared at him with reddened eyes. Kneel down. Ji Hongwen's face was filled with undeniable determination and anger. Seeing the terrible relationship between Ji Mengran and Jinwon today, he was so angry that his heart, liver, and lungs were aching. Old Ji, calm down. Mengran is still a child. Why are you saying all this to her? Everyone has the right to like someone. She didn't do anything bad. It's normal for a girl to fight for a man she likes. Besides, she didn't do anything, did she? Shenharu saw that Ji Hongwen was truly enraged. Standing by the side, she hurriedly raised her hand and patted his chest twice. Ji Hongwen's expression was ugly as he ignored Shenharu. He continued to stare at Ji Mengran, who was gritting her teeth and refusing to kneel. I'm asking you to kneel. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me? I'm not kneeling. Why should I kneel? Ji Mengran yelled angrily. She turned around and ran upstairs. Seeing that Ji Hongwen was about to drag her down with a cold expression, Shenharu hurriedly pulled him back. Don't be so angry. Jinwon is still here. The house was originally peaceful, but the moment she came back, she caused so much trouble. Don't push all the blame onto Mengran, shut up. Ji Hongwen suddenly looked at her. What did you just say? Jinwan Ji is my daughter. Why can't she return to this house? Shinharu was slightly unhappy that she was suddenly being vented. She removed her hand from his arm and spoke with an ugly expression. I saw that you kept blaming Mengran. My heart ached for the child, so I spoke up for her. But look at it now. In your eyes, aside from your daughter, Jinwan, no one else can speak up, right? Ji Hongwen frowned. It was clear that he did not intend to give her any face. Shinharu held back her anger and did not speak. She raised her eyes to look at Jinwan, only to see Jinwan's cold and indifferent expression. She was so angry that her teeth were itching. This little wench. Previously, when she returned home, she was still somewhat restrained. Now, she did not even bother to restrain herself and immediately started a fight. This was not a festive occasion. She suddenly rushed back to the Ji family and started a fight. What exactly did she mean? Footsteps could be heard from upstairs. Ji Mengran quickly walked down the stairs with a suitcase in her hands. Jinwan saw this scene and coldly raised her brows. She did not speak. Ji Hongwen narrowed his eyes in anger. You want to leave? Fine, if you dare to walk out of the house with a suitcase, don't ever come back. Scram. Our Ji family doesn't have a daughter like you. Ji Mingran's footsteps abruptly froze. However, she did not look at anyone as she dragged her suitcase down the stairs. She glanced at Jinwan one last time before pulling open the door and walking out. This child, why is she leaving? Shinharu muttered. She then looked at Jinwan and softly complained, how can there be such a sister? No matter how wrong Mengran is, at the very least, she has never done anything that goes against reason. Why can't you tolerate your own sister and have to force her to leave? Are you only satisfied when Mengran cuts off all ties with the family? Are you only happy when your family is destroyed? Will it kill you to speak less? Ji Hongwen turned to glare at her angrily. Shinharu was about to speak again when she suddenly heard Jinwan speak mildly. If I return to the Ji family, how can the Ji family be destroyed? On the contrary. Auntie Shin, if you continue to stay in the Ji family, that might not be the case. Shinharu furrowed her brows and glared fiercely at Jinwan. Nuan, what do you mean by that? Jinwan revealed a very mild smile. When she heard the sound of a car passing by, she turned to leave and did not explain further. Ji Mengran drove a car out of the Ji family's garage, only to see Jinwan standing in the front yard. If it weren't for her father, Ji Mengran would really want to step on the accelerator and kill her. No. She had to endure it. She would not give up everything she wanted so easily. However, she could not allow Jinwan to lead her by the nose. There must be a way to control her. Ji Mengran pressed on the car horn and lowered the car window, shouting, if you don't want to die, scram. It was as though Jinwan could see through her heart. She stood there without moving, coldly and indifferently glancing at her. Ji Mengran angrily got out of the car. She slammed the car door and walked toward her. Do you really think that with Dad backing you up, you can be so arrogant? Jinwan, let me tell you. Where do you want to go? Jinwan appeared as though she did not hear her words. She only smiled faintly and glanced at Ji Mingran's furious expression. Seeing Jinwan's expression, Ji Mengran was about to go crazy. She gritted her teeth and glared at her. The Ji family can't contain me, but there's definitely a place that can. Jinwan smiled. She was slightly taller than Ji Mengran. She leaned forward slightly, and Ji Mengran felt an indescribable pressure. She took a step back. Chapter 178. Ji Mingran's heart sank, and she took another step back. Her legs were so weak that she could barely stand. She could only lean against the car behind her to steady herself. Her face was pale, and she looked at Jinwon in disbelief and guilt at the fake smile on Jinwon's face. How did she know? How did he know about the friend she had made? How did she know what she was thinking? Could it be that Jinwon was possessed by some kind of demon or ghost? She even had the ability to predict things. No. That was impossible. Something must have gone wrong somewhere. Jinwon guessed that Jinwon had already investigated her and found out about the friend she had made before, so she followed the clues to the melon. That must be it. Even though she thought this way, Ji Mengran still stared at Jinwon in fear. She could not understand why Jinwon had become so unpredictable. Ji Mingran's entire body was extremely tense. Jinwon only looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. She did not have any other expression or movement. Jinwon reached out and patted her shoulder. Mengran, as a person, it's best to be quiet and not have too many thoughts. If you want to destroy someone, you must be careful not to destroy yourself first. Ji Mengran leaned against the car. Her expression was stiff like a fossil, and her entire body was about to slide off the car door. She raised her hand to push Jinwon's hand away, avoiding her touch. Originally, Ji Mengran was not afraid of her words at all. However, earlier in Jinwon's eyes, there seemed to be something unexplainable. It was a kind of hatred that had been hidden for many years and thousands of words. Ji Mengran could not understand it. The only thing she knew was fear. An indescribable coldness from Jinwon's gaze caused Ji Mengran to feel fear in her bones. The coldness that seeped into her bones was indescribable. Since things had already developed to this stage, Jinwon did not intend to keep Ji Mengran in suspense any longer. You're on your own. Jinwon's gaze swept past her face. Her lips curved into a smile that Ji Mengran wanted to personally tear apart. She elegantly and indifferently turned to return inside. Ji Mengran had been standing by the car door in a daze. She heard the door open and close. After confirming that Jinwon had entered, she slowly and carefully exhaled. She suddenly sniffed, picked up her new cell phone, and opened the videos of Jinwon that she had secretly taken before. In the videos, Jinwon was like a proud peacock, looking down on everyone, full of flaws, and it was easy for her to catch them. These videos were what she wanted to show Mo Jingshan, to let him see how spoiled Jinwon was in life. After watching the videos again, Ji Mingran's palms were covered with a layer of sweat. In just one night, Jinwon had become so uncontrollable. She was good at scheming. She appeared innocent, but in fact, she was terrifyingly black-bellied. She could even accurately grasp everything she had done and not done. She could figure out her thoughts so thoroughly. She did not even have a chance to retaliate. It was as though she had been led by the nose by Jinwon. No matter how much a person changed, it was impossible for her to become like this. In just one night, she was able to understand all of her goals. She was even able to predict and guess things that had yet to happen. Her heart and original plans were completely exposed. Jinwon's body, was she hiding some secret? There must be a secret. Otherwise, it shouldn't be like this. Everything was too illogical. Everything was within Jinwon's control. This was too illogical. After Jinwon entered, the villa had already regained its peace due to Shinharu's pretense. Mengran has really left. Seeing that Jinwon had returned alone, Shinharu asked with a frown. Jinwon calmly glanced at her. Auntie Shin, I really can't understand people like you. Back then, in order to stay in the Ji family safely, you cut off all ties with your own son just like that. You're so heartless, yet now you're so concerned about a stepdaughter. Nuan Nuan, what are you saying? Although my tone earlier was a little harsh, didn't I still hope for the two of you to live well together? Shinharu smiled as she tucked her hair behind her ears. She assumed the attitude of a good wife and mother. Let's not talk about the past. All these years, it's been you and Mengran in front of me. I know very well who's close and who's distant. Jinwan smiled, but her smile did not reach her eyes. She looked toward Ji Hongwen, whose expression was still ugly. Dad, let's talk. From the moment Jinwan entered the door, Ji Hongwen knew that this child definitely had something to say. He said, wait for me in the study. This child, she's still so secretive. I've already married into the Ji family for so many years. It's not like I'm an outsider. What can't she say in front of me? No matter how hard Shinharu tried to hold it in, her tone was still somewhat strange. Jinwan was about to head upstairs when she passed by Shinharu. Her footsteps seemed to subconsciously pause. Using a voice that only she could hear, she lowered her voice and said, Auntie Shin, I haven't settled the debt with Shingihan back then. Don't think that you can protect him by cutting off all ties with him. You've been hiding in the Ji family for so many years. You must be tired, right? Shinharu's expression faltered. She abruptly turned to look at her. Jinwan smiled at her. I advise you not to continue wearing a mask in the Ji family. It's so tiring. Finishing her words, Jinwan did not wait for Shinharu's expression and headed upstairs. She did not wait for long in the study before Ji Hongwen directly entered. You suddenly came back in such a hurry. What do you want to say? Dad, Auntie Shin has been married to you for many years. I know this. In the past, although I wasn't sensible and didn't treat her well at home, I didn't especially target her. You should know this very well. Jinwan slowly opened her mouth to speak. Ji Hongwen nodded. Some time ago, I took away a few of the so-called health supplements she bought for you from overseas and had them professionally analyzed. As Jinwan spoke, she took out a stack of papers from her bag and placed it on the table in the study. These are the results of the analysis. Please take a look. Ji Hongwen walked to the table and put on his glasses. He then picked up the medical analysis report and carefully read through it. After reading through it, Ji Hongwen was not as angry as Jinwan thought he would be. He stood by the table and narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, Don't make this matter public. You're my daughter. I believe 100% in every word you say. However, this matter cannot be concluded so easily. I need to confirm it first before speaking. Jinwan was about to speak when she suddenly paused. She turned to look at the door behind her. Outside the door, there was a figure carefully standing there. As though afraid of being discovered, he quietly hid by the door, revealing only a small part of his shadow. If Jinwan was not standing so close to the door and was more sensitive, she would not have noticed him. She looked in the direction of the door before turning to look at Ji Hongwen. She slowly curved her lips at him. Chapter 179. Jinwan did not purposely lower her voice. She only smiled and said, Dad, do you still remember that when I was young, I had an assignment that combined guilty conscience and walls have ears to form a sentence? At the time, I didn't know how to form it. Now, it seems like there's finally an answer to this question. The person outside clearly understood the meaning behind Jinwan's words. She hid outside the door, wanting to leave. However, knowing that she had already been discovered, she stood stiffly outside the door for a moment before abruptly pushing open the study door and entering. Nuan, you can't say things like that. It's true that walls have ears, but having a guilty conscience has nothing to do with me. Earlier, I was preparing to return to my room to take something when I heard you and your dad talking in the study. Out of curiosity, I came over to listen in. In the end, I heard you framing me. Shinharu had an aggrieved expression as she glanced at the cold and expressionless Ji Hongwen. Old Ji, it's true that Nuan Nuan is your daughter, but the motives behind her words and actions are too obvious. First, she chased Mengran away, and now, she's dealing with me. Shinharu knew how to act aggrieved, and so did Jin Wan. Jin Wan turned to look at Ji Hongwen, a bitter smile on her lips. Dad, you can choose not to believe me, but you can't not believe the analysis of the medicine. As your daughter, I can't possibly act like an outsider and tamper with your medicine. Your daughter hopes for you to live to a ripe old age, but that's not necessarily the case for some people. Shinharu's eyelids twitched. Right now, Jin Wan really knew how to use both soft and hard tactics. Her actions of taking a step back as though she was aggrieved were clearly forcing Ji Hongwen to take this matter seriously. To be able to block his escape route so fiercely, he really couldn't underestimate her. Dad, if you don't want to make a big deal out of this matter because of your past relationship with Auntie Shin and want to settle it with her alone, I'll just say it here. I won't participate in how it should be settled. Jin Wan once again took a step back. It sounded like she was taking a step back, but it was clear that she did not intend to turn the matter into a small one. Nuan Nuan, your words aren't right. I clearly didn't do anything. Right now, you're making it sound as though your father is trying to protect me. Yes, he's your father, but he's also my husband. Who would use such methods to harm their own husband's life? Jin Wan's face darkened. Shinharu saw that Jin Wan was so insistent and had no choice but to grit her teeth. He had to endure it. If he didn't, who knew what Jin Wan would do to catch him off guard? Ji Hongwen's expression was a bit dark. Just as Jin Wan said, he didn't intend to make a big deal out of it whether it was true or not. The Ji family's business was deteriorating day by day. He was so busy that he did not have the time to care about the family's matters. Everything in the family had been handed over to Shinharu. If things were really as Jin Wan said, right now, for the sake of his face, he could not make a fuss like this. Nuan Nuan, go back to your room and rest. Ji Hongwen suddenly said. He did not mention anything about the medicine. Jin Wan pursed her lips and did not speak. She then smiled. All right. After returning to her own bedroom, Jin Wan entered. Her expression was still calm and indifferent. She paused for a moment and seemed to have understood her father's thoughts. She picked up her phone and casually flipped through it. Then, he opened a hidden monitoring software in his phone and watched all the images taken by the surveillance camera. When he saw the scene he wanted, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he put his phone back into his pocket without batting an eyelid. At this moment, in the study, Shinharu could not guess what Ji Hongwen was thinking, but the oppressive atmosphere in the study made her feel a little diffident. She walked over to him, smiling as she said, Old Ji, in the past, when I first married into the family, Nuan Nuan never gave me any good looks, but at the very least, she was able to remain silent and calm at home. Now, perhaps she thinks I'm too easy to bully, so... Ji Hongwen abruptly raised his hand and gave her a harsh slap. He angrily said, Don't think that just because I'm protecting you, I'll believe your nonsense. Back when your son cut off all ties with you and was chased out of the Ji family, I still haven't forgotten the look in his eyes. Has he completely cut off all ties with you? The two of you, mother and son, have long been eyeing the Ji family covetously, haven't you? Shinharu's body trembled. She stood stiffly for a long time before reaching out to pull his arm. Old Ji, don't be fooled by Jin Wan's words. I really didn't do such a thing. You also know how hard it was for me to cut off all ties with Ihan back then. You also know that after so many years, as long as someone mentions his name, I can't control myself. As a mother, my heart has always been uncomfortable, but you can't use his matter to suspect me again and again. Yes, I admit that Ihan has returned to the Xing family now. That matter back then was his fault, but that's all in the past. I swear that everything Ihan has done after returning to the Xing family has nothing to do with me. Regardless of whether it's Xing Ihan or the Xing family, it no longer has anything to do with me. Ji Hongwen coldly smiled. Is that so? I swear to the heavens and earth. I've stayed in the Ji family for so many years, wholeheartedly protecting this family for you. Shinharu's eyes were red. Ji Hongwen chuckled. What's with the medicine? Even if Nuan finds you an eyesore, without any evidence, she would definitely not say such things. The analysis report of the medicine is right here. How can you explain it? Shinharu immediately refuted. Her analysis report is fake. Fake. Ji Hongwen coldly stared at her. What evidence can you bring out to prove that this report is fake? Isn't it just taking the medicine out for an examination? Then check it again. Check it again in front of all of us. I don't believe that she can do anything in front of all of us. She took this kind of analysis report to frame me. Who knows where she got the medicine from to make a fake report? Ji Hongwen did not speak. His expression was still unhappy as he glanced at her. Shinharu had an aggrieved expression. Look, we still don't know the truth. Just because of a few words from Jin Wan, you no longer trust me. You don't even give me any face. Your daughter is really smart now. She knows how to drive a wedge between us husband and wife. Ji Hongwen was filled with anger. When he heard these words, his expression turned even uglier. Without a word, he abruptly walked out of the study. Seeing this, Shinharu's eyes brightened. She turned and followed him out. Old Ji, we have to check those medicine again. You have to help me clear my name. Otherwise, how can I continue living in this family in the future? Ji Hongwen was about to head to his room with Shinharu following behind. When the two of them passed by Jin Wan's bedroom, they saw that Jin Wan had already come out. Jin Wan stood by the door, playing with her phone in her fingers. Clearly, she had heard Shinharu's words. Her eyes carried a hint of mockery as though she had seen through her earlier. Chapter 180. In the hallway, Shinharu did not look at Ji Hongwen's expression. She was only looking at the chilling smile on Jin Wan's face. Jin Wan's expression really caused Shinharu's teeth to itch. She could no longer hold it in and said provocatively, Wan, didn't you insist earlier that there's a problem with my medicine? Why don't we take it for a new test and see who's the one lying? Jin Wan calmly glanced at her and then smiled ambiguously at the unhappy Ji Hongwen. Dad, you've been in the business world for so many years. Right now, it's clear that there's a problem with her attitude. Isn't this admitting that there's something fishy going on? Shinharu furrowed her brows at Jin Wan. She unhappily raised her voice and angrily said, What problem can I have? You insist that there's poison in the medicine and even brought out some analysis report. Now that I'm saying that I want to take it for a new test, you're saying that I'm admitting that there's something fishy going on. Why are you saying everything? You're deliberately making things difficult for me, blocking my way with every word. I think you're the one with a problem. Shinharu narrowed her eyes at her. Look at you, you're so young, yet you're so good at lying. My matter has already been turned into this. Don't tell me that you're also trying to frame Meng Ran. Jin Wan smiled mildly and did not speak. Seeing that she did not speak, Shinharu glanced at her and observed Jin Wan's expression. After confirming that Jean Wan had nothing to say, she raised her brows with some satisfaction. Nuan, did you think that it was too easy to pull down Meng Ran's position in the Ji family, so you planned to make a move on me? Today, Meng Ran ran away from home just like that. In the blink of an eye, you're targeting me. Are you trying to swallow the Ji family whole? Your father is still alive. Isn't your appetite a little too big? Auntie Shin, there's no need for you to fan the flames. I've brought evidence back. No matter how you refute, it's useless. The evidence speaks for itself. Why don't we be more practical? You say I'm framing you, but where's the evidence? Jean Wan retorted, appearing as though she was innocently walking into Shinharu's trap. Shinharu chuckled. Evidence, I have it. I'm just afraid you'll cry when the time comes. After all, I'm already so old. I've thought things through more clearly. As long as the misunderstanding is resolved, it's fine as long as your father understands me. But if your malicious nature is exposed, who knows how Mo Jingshan and the Mo family will look at you in the future. With that, without waiting for Ji Hongwen to speak, and without looking at Jean Wan's eyes, she turned and walked quickly to the master bedroom. Seeing that Shinharu had entered, Ji Hongwen thoughtfully followed in to take a look. Jean Wan, on the other hand, unhurriedly followed behind. The moment she entered the master bedroom, she saw Shinharu nimbly opening the drawer by the bed and taking out a large pile of medicine. The medicines that Jean Wan thought were problematic were laid out one by one. She turned back to look at Ji Hongwen. Old Ji, these are the medicines I bought for you, right? Ji Hongwen nodded. Old Ji, this is the medicine I bought for you, right? Ji Hongwen, however, furrowed his brows. Seeing how she could not wait to get away from her crime, and how she placed all the medicine, it was as though she knew all along. This woman whom he had married for so many years, he had never seriously considered whether she had any other intentions. However, at this moment, there was no need for Jean Wan to say anything. He could already see that there were too many problems hidden within. Although he had taken these medicines almost every day, he had never taken them in front of her. She actually knew that these medicines were all in the drawer. Even after buying them for so long, she could still clearly distinguish each bottle. If one were to say that there was nothing fishy about this, no one would believe it. Seeing that Ji Hongwen's expression was cold and silent, Shinharu turned her face toward Jean Wan. Nuan, are you sure that these were the medicines you brought for a checkup? Jean Wan found it laughable. Auntie Shin, why are you so anxious? My father's drawer has quite a lot of medicine. The medicine bottles all look the same. All sorts of blood pressure and sugar-lowering medicines are placed on top. You took them all out just like that. Those who don't know would think that you've been staring at the placement of these medicines every day to see if they have been taken. Of course, Shinharu would not lose her composure so quickly because of these words. Previously, when Jean Wan came back twice, she already felt that she was suspicious of something. Furthermore, after the reversal at the Mo family home, she could tell that Jean Wan was indeed different now. Shinharu's heart had always been filled with lingering fear. She was afraid that Jean Wan would discover something and she would be caught off guard, so she had long made preparations. I bought these medicines. When I was on vacation overseas, I passed by a pharmacy and carefully picked them out. Every single bottle was handled by me. Of course, I'm very clear about it. Shinharu's expression was calm and fearless. Jean Wan held back a smile as she gazed at the emerald bracelet on her wrist. Auntie Shin's life sure is comfortable. You said that you would go on a vacation, and you could. The bracelet on your wrist is also very special. Normally, it's rare to see such a good quality. If I remember correctly, my father gave it to you many years ago, right? It's worth tens of millions. The more you wear it, the better it looks. I wonder if you've lent it to someone else to wear. Of course not. I've always treasured this bracelet and have never taken it off. Everything your father gave me, I've always treated it like a treasure by my side. How could I possibly lend it to someone else? Shinharu did not understand the meaning behind Ji-Hwan's sudden change in topic. She looked at her with a guarded gaze, but her words were determined to protect the relationship between her and Ji Hongwen as an old married couple. Is that so? Ji-Hwan heard her words and directly raised her phone, tapping on the screen. Instantly, a clear image appeared on the screen. In the video, the bedside table and its surroundings could be seen. The time of the video was also more than 20 days ago. A pair of hands could be seen quickly taking out all the medicine from the drawer. Boxes after boxes were replaced with other medicine that looked the same. Even the amount of medicine in each bottle was the same. Looking closely, the color of the medicine was the same, and there was no special smell. Even if the medicine was replaced, it would not be easy to find out. Although she could only see the movements of the pair of hands in the image, they were very white and wore an emerald bracelet. The moment she saw the image on Ji-Hwan's phone, Shinharu's expression immediately froze. She abruptly returned to her senses and finally understood that Ji-Hwan was actually trying to trick her. Chapter 181. Shinharu clearly knew that there was no turning back, but she still wanted to argue. You casually took something that was recorded from who knows where and said that I changed the medicine. Ji-Hwan, you're really good at playing with high technology these days. You can say whatever you want to say. Whatever you want to fabricate, you can. This counts as high technology. Ji-Hwan looked at her in amusement. What era are we in? It's just a surveillance camera. What's so difficult about it? You actually dare to place surveillance cameras in your father's bedroom. You still have the cheek to say that, this is my father's bedroom after all. I won't take pictures of places that shouldn't be taken. Ji-Hwan coldly interrupted her, walked to the table, and took down a tiny surveillance camera from under the lampshade of the lamp placed on the table. Although it only captured the scene on the table, it's enough, isn't it? Auntie Shin. The evidence was conclusive, and the evidence was closely linked. She did not let go of any opportunity to force Shinharu into a dead end. Shinharu's gaze was stiff as she stared at the miniature camera in Ji-Hwan's hands. She abruptly turned to Ji Hongwen. Old Ji, listen to my explanation. Ji Hongwen's expression could no longer be described as simple anger and fear. What's there to explain? Is there a need to explain? I really didn't expect that back then. I pitied you and brought you into the Ji family. In the end, you'll personally send me to the gates of hell. You're really good, aw. What a vicious and merciless person. Shinharu panicked. Old Ji, the medicine really has nothing to do with me. After all, my face wasn't even captured. How can she be so sure that it's me? Even in court, there has to be conclusive evidence. How can she be so sure that it's me just because of this bracelet? The bracelet was given to you by me. Ji-Hwan can't recognize it, but do you think I can't? We've been married for so many years. I can recognize your hand the moment it appeared in the video. Is there a need for Ji-Hwan to confirm it? Ji Hongwen's eyes were filled with coldness. His anger could no longer be appeased. Shinharu refused to give up. Ji Hongwen didn't doubt Ji-Hwan's words and didn't want to make a fuss. Now that the truth was in front of him, not only could he lose face, but the fire in his heart was also burning. With a slap, he slapped her again, venting all the fire in his heart on her, slapping her hard and hard. Ji-Hwan tossed the miniature pinhole camera into her pocket and did not say another word. She expressionlessly watched Shinharu's disheveled expression. If it didn't concern her father's life, she wouldn't mind continuing to play with Shinharu. However, if the matter of these drugs was not exposed, Dad's health would only deteriorate. She had done what she had to do. She wouldn't interfere with how his woman was going to be dealt with. Shinharu held on to her swollen face. She turned to see Ji-in-won standing by the side, watching the fire burn. Because she was too angry and hateful, Shinharu gritted her teeth and forced herself to calm down. She then glanced at the enraged Ji Hongwen and lowered her head. She pitifully said in a soft voice, "All right. I admit it. Old Ji, I'll explain everything clearly to you. Actually, the father of the man I married is the current head of the Xing family. He wanted to borrow my hands to swallow a sum of money from the Ji family. Initially, I didn't know that the medicine was poisonous. They threatened me and forced me to give it to you. Later on, I found out. I didn't change the medicine to clear my name. Instead, I was afraid that you would really eat it and harm your body. That's why I secretly changed it. Firstly, I didn't want you to find out. Secondly, I didn't want the Xing family to know. Old Ji, I really did it for you. However, I've lived in the Xing family before. Those people are scheming, and I can't win against them. I didn't want to be forced to such a state," she kept explaining, hoping to salvage the situation. However, her gaze landed on Ji-in-won's side. She discovered that Ji-in-won seemed to have seen through her expression and was only smiling mildly. Shinharu's heart thumped. She did not dare to look at her, afraid that Ji-in-won would see through her. Ji Hongwen resisted the urge to rip the bracelet off her wrist and smash it. He coldly said, "From today onwards, you're not allowed to go anywhere. You can only stay in this room. You're not allowed to answer a single phone call. You're not allowed to interact with the Xing family or any outsiders. Everything in the Ji family's villa will be handed over to the housekeeper. The matters in the company that have been handed over to you will be handed over to someone else. Don't even think about getting a single cent from the Ji family." Shinharu's body abruptly swayed. She took a step back and sat down on the bed. Her eyes trembled as she looked at him. "Old Ji, you can't treat me like this. If you say another word, I'll immediately scram out of the Ji family. Don't blame me for not leaving you with your last bit of face," Ji Hongwen said impatiently. Shinharu immediately shut her mouth, not daring to speak any further. Being locked up at home was better than being chased out. As long as she waited for her punishment, there might be a chance for things to turn for the better. If she was chased out just like this, not only would she lose all her face, she might not even have the chance to make a comeback with Ji Hongwen in the future. After enduring for a while, she sat on the edge of the bed quietly, not daring to say another word. 2 days later, Ji-in-won took the time to visit the hospital. She had originally planned to use the fact that her hand had recovered to visit Dr. Chin and see if he had the time. If he had the time, she would like to treat him to a meal. After all, she had brought him quite a bit of trouble when she asked him to help with the drug analysis. Regardless of how much face Chin sighting had given Mo Jingshan, from her level, she still had to formally thank him. The moment she entered the hospital, she suddenly saw an ambulance stop by the entrance. A person covered in blood was being carried in by the medical staff. Ji-in-won stood by the hospital entrance. From the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw a figure running out of the ambulance. She never expected it to be Shi Nianj. She then saw that Shi Nianj's hands and clothes were also covered in blood. Her complexion was pale as she followed the medical staff in. When she passed by, Ji-in-won asked with concern, "Miss Shi, did something happen?" Shi Nianj's footsteps paused. She turned to see Ji-in-won. In her panic, she only nodded politely at Ji-in-won. She did not say much and continued to run in. The medical staff who followed behind shouted, "Everyone, make way, make way. There's a huge car accident ahead. There's an injured person behind. Make way." Jean-Wan immediately took a step back and saw another person covered in blood being pushed in. Chapter 182. When the medical staff went in, Jean-Wan walked up to her. "Miss Shi, are you all right? There's so much blood on your body. If you're injured, go and deal with it quickly. Is it your friend or someone else inside? I'll stay and talk to the doctor for you. Go and check your wounds." "I'm fine." Shi Nianj turned her eyes and raised her hand to show Jean-Wan the blood on her hand and body. "I'm not injured. The blood is all theirs. My driver and assistant are injured. They're seriously injured." "I'm fine." At this time, many reporters ran in from outside the hospital. While filming the situation in the hospital, they came over to ask, "Excuse me, are you the family or friends of the injured? Can anyone tell us in detail about the heavy car accident on Yuanyang Avenue?" Outside the emergency room, there was a sudden chaos because of the reporter's intrusion. Shi Nianj did not speak. Jean-Wan was about to separate her from the reporters when suddenly, a low male voice came from behind the crowd. "Get out of the way." That voice was unbelievably cold. Jean-Wan turned her head abruptly and saw Qin Sighting standing there expressionlessly in a white coat. As soon as Qin Sighting appeared, all the medical staff on the first floor of the hospital fell into silence. No one dared to speak loudly. The reporters were stunned. When they turned back to see that it was a doctor who was so rude, they directly raised their cameras to point at him. However, before the reporters could speak, the hospital security guards had rushed out from behind Qin Sighting and chased the reporters out. As they were chased away, they said sternly, "The emergency room is not a place for reporters to film. Get out quickly. Don't block here and delay the doctor's treatment of the injured. Go." In an instant, the surroundings finally quieted down. Qin Sighting glanced at Jean-Wan coldly and indifferently, and then, as if inadvertently, his eyes fell on Shi Nianj, who was standing behind Jean-Wan. Seeing Shi Nianj standing there with a pale face and not speaking, he walked over. The man's voice was low and cold. "Where are you hurt?" This question was clearly directed at Shi Nianj. Shi Nianj clearly did not expect that the hospital she was brought to by the ambulance was actually the hospital where Qin Sighting was. She was silent for a moment. There was no obvious expression on her pale face. She only said mildly, "I'm not hurt." When she answered, Shi Nianj did not look at Qin Sighting. Her eyes were cold and clear, as cold as Qin Sighting's. Qin Sighting had one hand in the pocket of his white coat. His cold eyes swept over her, and a cold smile appeared on his lips. "That's true. Miss Shi's life has always been tough." At this moment, Shi Nianj abruptly turned to look at him and met Qin Sighting's cold gaze. Her gaze was calm and her tone was cold. "Right now, my driver and assistant are seriously injured. Their lives are unknown. Dr. Qin can target me, but please don't add insult to injury at this time." Qin Sighting scoffed coldly before sneering coldly, "I really couldn't tell that Miss Shi actually has a conscience toward the people around you. That conscience of yours that was eaten by a dog has been slowly growing back after all these years in America." Shi Nianj did not speak anymore and stared at him. Jean-Wan did not wish to interfere in other people's emotional matters, but she could not bear to listen any further. She moved closer to Qin Sighting's side and said softly, "Dr. Qin, when Miss Shi ran in earlier, she seemed to be limping. She might have hurt the tendons in her leg or injured her ankle. Her complexion is so bad. Although the blood on her body is not hers, she must have been frightened." You're a man. Don't stab her heart at a time like this, okay? At a time like this, he was still rubbing salt on Nian's wounds. She really could not tell that this man, who clearly held a scalpel to save lives every day, was actually such a cold-blooded and heartless fellow. Frightened? What does frightened count as? Enchanting said coldly and meaningfully, even if a person with a heart of stone was pierced by 1,000 arrows, they would not feel anything. If a few words of mine could stab her heart, she would not be Niang. After finishing his words, he abruptly turned to leave. Although Jin Wan wanted to accompany Miss Shi, who appeared to be in a sorry state both physically and mentally, the two of them were not familiar with each other. Furthermore, the purpose of her visit today was to thank Dr. Qin. After hesitating for a moment, she turned to leave the crowd. Enchanting took the lead and entered the elevator. Before the doors closed, Jin Wan rushed in. Enchanting glanced at her indifferently. His gaze was cold and indifferent. Clearly, he was not in the mood to speak. The elevator ascended slowly. Jin Wan watched the tall and cold man dressed in a white coat and chuckled teasingly. You clearly care about her, yet you insist on acting like you're heartless. You men's hearts can be considered a needle at the bottom of the ocean. Enchanting's expression was heavy, and he did not speak. Isn't your consultation room on the 16th floor of the hospital? The speed of this hospital's elevator is so slow, and there are often calls from other floors in the middle. You used such a short time to come down from the 16th floor. Clearly, you rushed down the stairs in one breath. You rushed to the first floor with the fastest speed possible and saw Miss Shi. After confirming that the one injured in the car accident was not her, you began to act as though you wanted to freeze the other party into ice. What's the point? Enchanting coldly glanced at her. Do you women all have so much to say? Jin Wan raised her brows and did not speak further. After all, she did not understand the situation and could not speak further. Isn't your hand already healed? Why did you suddenly come to the hospital? Enchanting directly changed the topic, looking at her unhappily. I came to thank you. Previously, you helped me bandage up my wound, and the medicine you prescribed for me were all very effective. Also, you helped me analyze my father's medication. Recently, I've really troubled you with many things, so I wanted to properly thank you. Enchanting snorted indifferently. There's no need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, go thank your man. Seeing Jin Wan's puzzled gaze, he coldly reprimanded, I've been so busy all day. If it weren't for your man constantly pushing your problems onto my head and urging me to resolve them as soon as possible, those medicines would have been in my drawer until the end of time. Jin Wan, he was really frank and straightforward. Although that's the case, I've troubled you. I originally wanted to treat you to a meal, but since you're so busy, we'll talk about it when you have time. Jin Wan's gaze shifted, and she suddenly smiled. When the day comes, Jingshen and I will treat you. Call Nanheng and Miss Shi as well. Hearing the three words Miss Shi, Enchanting directly snorted coldly. I'm not going. Jin Wan, Enchanting's attitude today was as though he had been stung by a bee. He did not give her any face at all, and could not even be bothered to show basic courtesy. Jin Wan also did not continue adding oil to the fire. At night, they returned to the Yew Garden Villa. Auntie Chen said that Mr. Mo had already been back for a while. Jin Wan returned to her room. When she pushed open the bedroom door, she heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom. Chapter 183. Hearing the phone ring, Jin Wan originally did not plan to answer it. She guessed that Imo Jingshan would be done showering soon, so she waited for him to come out and answer it himself. However, the phone kept vibrating. After a while, it continued to vibrate. It was already so late. Was there something urgent at the company? Jean Wan glanced at the number displayed. Only then did she realize that it was an international call. The number was from Los Angeles, America. The sound of water continued in the bathroom. Jean Wan stared at the string of numbers for a long time until the phone continued vibrating stubbornly in her hand. She composed herself and picked up the call. Hello, it's not convenient for Jing Shin to pick up the phone right now. If there's anything important, please call back later. She did not hang up immediately after speaking and waited for the other party to respond. However, the other party did not speak. Hello, can you hear me? Jean Wan asked mildly. The other party did not speak. The other party did not speak. Perhaps women were born with an especially sharp sixth sense. Jean Wan's gaze was fixed in the direction of the bathroom. Behind the door, there was fog and the sound of running water. If you're not going to speak, I'll hang up. Jing Shen is currently showering. When he comes out, I'll have him call you back. Jean Wan's tone was mild. Her words seemed unintentional, but they set off a silent ripple in the peaceful night. The phone was abruptly hung up, followed by the ear-piercing busy tone. From start to finish, the person who called did not say a single word. However, Jean Wan could sense that the other party's mood was extremely unhappy. Jean Wan sat on the sofa, holding his phone in a daze. The sound of water in the bathroom and the night outside complemented each other. She did not sleep well at the G home previously, and sleep quickly swept over her. Just as she was about to fall asleep on the sofa, a cool and wet arm reached over from behind her waist. She shivered abruptly, and the phone slipped out of her grip and fell to the ground. You're done showering. Jean Wan's head naturally leaned against his shoulder. She said sleepily, there was a call for you earlier. I picked it up, but the other party did not speak. Mo Jingshin's hand landed on her waist. In the next second, he placed her on the bed. Jean Wan hadn't taken a shower yet. She didn't want to sleep so early, but she was really sleepy. She frowned and finally couldn't help asking, aren't you going to call him back? Mo Jingshin pressed down on her body, who was about to get up. He lifted the blankets and pulled her into his embrace. He kissed her forehead, saying softly, there's no need. He didn't even look at his phone after he came out. In the dead of the night, Jean Wan turned over in her sleep. She was still in Mo Jingshin's arms. She opened her eyes and looked at where his phone was. It seemed like his phone didn't make any more noises. She was really too sleepy. Recently, Jean Wan often felt sleepy. Last night, when she had dinner at the G home, she also did not have much of an appetite and felt weak all over. She glanced in that direction again, then closed her eyes again and leaned into the man's embrace to sleep. In the dark night, the room was silent. The next day, when Jean Wan received a call from the police station, she was rushing to the studio. Hello, Miss G. This is the Central City Police Station. May I ask if you know Madame Xia Tian? Jean Wan was startled. I do. She's my friend and also a member of our studio. What's wrong? Did something happen to her? Nothing happened to her. She was the one who injured someone and said she was an orphan with no relatives or friends. She refused to cooperate with our investigation. We found Miss G's number on her phone. Please make a trip to the police station. Jean Wan was slightly confused. Xia Tian did not want to have any contact with the Xia family in S City. This was not the first time she lied about being an orphan. But Xia Tian had injured him. How was that possible? She had just been discharged from the hospital. Her legs were still weak. How could she have the ability to injure someone? Jean Wan didn't have time to ask. She quickly drove to the police station. When she reached the police station, she quickly walked in. The moment she entered, she saw Xia Tian sitting in the interrogation room by the side door. Her expression was indifferent as she stared at the police officer who was taking down her statement. It seemed like they had been facing each other for a long time. My apologies, Xia Tian is my friend. May I ask what exactly happened? Jin Wan pulled a police officer aside and asked softly. The police officer glanced at Jin Wan and then at Xia Tian, who was still in the interrogation room. As though he had seen something strange, he said, "She injured a reporter and smashed his camera." After being brought to the police station, although she didn't resist, she didn't cooperate at all. She said she didn't know anything and even said she didn't have parents and that she was born from a rock. Her mouth is very tight. If I hadn't snatched her phone and found your number, she would most likely be sitting here staring at our police officer until tomorrow morning. Jin Wan, she smiled awkwardly at the police officer and repeatedly apologized. She then entered the interrogation room and nodded apologetically at the police officer. She then moved closer to Xia Tian's side and lowered her voice to ask, "Didn't you just report to my studio today? Why did you suddenly get beaten up?" As soon as Xia Tian saw Jin Wan, she immediately glared at the little policeman outside the door angrily and said unwillingly, "This bunch of talkative policemen. If they have any problems, they can just come at me. Why did they call you here? What exactly happened?" Jin Wan glared at her. Xia Tian rolled her eyes at the light in the interrogation room and said in a low voice, "I went to report to your office in the morning, but when I arrived, I found someone sneaking around your office for a long time. Then, he went downstairs and hid outside Jinlin building. I saw that he had a video camera in his hand, and I became suspicious. I went over to snatch the camera from him and flipped through it. I realized that it was full of photos of you. And it wasn't just near your studio. This person seemed to have been secretly following you for a long time. There are many photos of you." Jin Wan's brows jumped. Her expression was strange. Why would he take photos of me? Chapter 184. Jin Wan suppressed the suspicions she had toward the person who took the photos. "Since there's a reason for you to beat someone up, just tell me. Why are you so stubborn and unwilling to give a statement?" Xia Tian immediately rolled her eyes at the police officer in the interrogation room. "Who says the police are good for the good? I already said my leg was injured, but they still forced me into the police car and took me away. What's worse, they even confiscated my walking stick and said it was a weapon. They said that I was using my leg injury as an excuse to gain sympathy. What kind of police are they? Each and every one of them is like a block of wood and won't listen to what I say. It's obviously the person who took the photos secretly. Why did they lock me up here and interrogate me?" The police officer had clearly heard Xia Tian's complaint, but he still said sternly and expressionlessly, "Madam Xia, recording a statement doesn't mean a conviction. No matter what the truth is, it's true that you beat someone up. If you don't give a clear statement, the police can only use a more forceful method to execute you." Xia Tian rolled her eyes and turned to whisper in Jin Wan's ear so that only she could hear. "Earlier on, he was the one who forced me into the police car. Now he wants me to cooperate and give a statement. I won't let him off so easily. Jin Wan, big sister, is the point right now to be angry with the police?" Feng Ling, who was outside the police station, looked at the situation inside and turned to take her phone to make a call. "Mr. Mo, after all, Xia Tian really hurt someone. Right now, not only did she refuse to cooperate with the interrogation, but she was also waiting for the hospital's evaluation. The police station refused to let her go, so Jin Wan decided to accompany Xia Tian in the police station. But she never expected Mo Jingshan would suddenly come here. When she saw Mo Jingshan's car, Jin Wan stood up in surprise and looked out. Xia Tian completely ignored the oppressive atmosphere in the police station. When she learned that Mo Jingshan would actually lower himself to come to such a place, she immediately smiled at Jin Wan with a gossipy expression. Jin Wan had just walked out when she heard that the police were cautiously and respectfully explaining the situation to Mo Jingshan. She rushed forward. Mo Jingshan, who was negotiating with the police, saw her and immediately looked in her direction. Jin Wan approached him and lowered her voice to say, "Xia Tian did this because of me. Did Feng Ling tell you about me at the police station?" Mo Jingshan did not reply. He looked at Jin Wan's expression and saw that she did not appear to have suffered any grievances in the police station. He then turned his attention to Xia Tian in the interrogation room. His gaze was calm and composed as he held Jin Wan's hand, calmly saying, "Wait for me in the car." "But Xia Tian hasn't, she will be released soon. Since I'm here, don't worry and leave it to me, Mo Jingshan's eyes were clear. In a place like the police station, Jin Wan was indeed not as powerful as Mo Jingshan. She did not say more and returned to the car to wait. When he got on the car, Feng Ling followed him. Jin Wan sat in the car and looked at Feng Ling. "Did you find out that I was followed and photographed?" Feng Ling only hesitated for half a second before answering truthfully, "Yes." Jin Wan calmly glanced at her. "Why didn't you tell me in advance? That person has been following you for a long time, but he has been careful to keep his distance. The only things he could capture were photos of Mrs. Mo's daily life and work." "There wasn't anything too personal," Feng Ling calmly said. "In order to make him give himself away, I intentionally made the security system in front of the studio malfunction so that the other party would lower his guard. I didn't expect that he would be unable to sit still so quickly. Originally, I wanted to take you down today, but I didn't expect Miss Xia Tian to discover it first. I also didn't expect Miss Xia Tian's temper to be so fiery." "What's the other party's background?" Jin Wan's tone did not sound heavy, but her light words carried extra weight. This time, Feng Ling was silent for several seconds and did not directly answer. "You can't say." When Jin Wan spoke, she acutely sensed that Feng Ling's gaze seemed to be directed toward the police station. She was looking in Mo Jingshan's direction. Feng Ling withdrew her gaze and still did not answer. Jin Wan stared at her. "Feng Ling, although Mr. Mo is your true employer, after all, you've been with me for the longest time. You should understand my character well. Although I'm not too persistent in getting to the bottom of things, nor will I make things difficult for you, I really hope that you can be more honest with me." Feng Ling was quiet for a moment. She watched Jin Wan's calm expression and softly said, "The other party's background is very simple. He's just an unknown reporter in High City. However, not long ago, his account suddenly received a transfer of 600,000 yuan. The sender is from Los Angeles, America." Speaking up to this point, Feng Ling looked at Jin Wan's narrowed eyes. "Mrs. Mo, if my guess is correct, the person behind him is the same person who sent the package." Jin Wan more or less guessed it. She directly asked, "You were once trained in a base in America, and you seem to have quite a good relationship with Nanhang and the rest. So, who exactly is this person, do you know?" This time, Feng Ling quickly answered, "I don't know." The chill in Jin Wan's heart gradually rose. She understood Feng Ling's gaze. Although Feng Ling did not speak, she did not overdo it. However, Jin Wan could clearly feel that Feng Ling wanted to remind her of something, but she could not say more. After settling the matter at the police station, Jin Wan returned to the studio and called Xiao Ba over. She had Xiao Ba bring her the information on the delivery company in Los Angeles. She had to find that person. She had to find out who exactly it was. In the end, after Jean Wan finished her meeting and returned to the office, she heard Xiao Ba say, "Boss Wan, that delivery company actually closed down." Jean Wan paused in her movements and raised her eyes to look at her. "What?" Xiao Ba raised the information in her hands for her to see. "It's the company you asked me to investigate. Such a large international delivery company suddenly closed down a few days ago. Furthermore, their name has been removed from the American International Delivery Service Center. It's as though they disappeared overnight." Jean Wan took out the delivery receipt from the drawer and compared it with it. She then checked it on the computer. Indeed, it was as Xiao Ba had said. This international delivery company really did declare bankruptcy in Los Angeles a few days ago. The entire company was sold off in pieces, and the company's name was also removed. It had only been a few days, but an internationally renowned delivery company had completely disappeared just like that. Chapter 185. Just as she was thinking, Feng Ling suddenly entered with a large bouquet of red roses in one hand and an exquisite small bag in the other. After entering, she placed these two items on Jean Wan's desk. Jean Wan had yet to return to herself. She raised her eyes to see the large bouquet of flowers. "What's this?" "Someone sent it over earlier. They said it's for you." "I've checked it, and there's nothing wrong with it." Feng Ling looked at her. "For me?" Jean Wan pointed at the roses on the table, her gaze surprised. Feng Ling nodded and did not say more. She turned to leave. "Wow! There must be hundreds of them, right?" Xiao Ba laid on Jean Wan's desk with an envious expression. "Who sent them? So romantic. Is it a gift from CEOMO? How would Jean Wan know who sent them? It wasn't her birthday, nor was it a special holiday or an anniversary. Besides, she had only found out about the incident at the police station this morning. It had only been a few hours since Mo Jingshan sent her back to the studio. Why would he suddenly send her flowers and gifts? Mo Jingshan was not schizophrenic." Jean Wan picked up the large bouquet of flowers in confusion. The delicate roses emitted the unique fragrance of roses. Each one seemed to have been carefully selected. With one glance, she could tell that they were of the highest quality. Not only were they expensive, even the outer packaging looked very girlish. It was made of pink paper. This color, Jean Wan could not help but recall the pink gown Xing Yihan had specially prepared for her. Many years ago, when she was in her teens, she would often follow Ji Hongwen to various events. She would often wear pink, whether it was her gown, shoes, or bag. At that time, she was indeed pink at heart. However, as time passed, she gradually lost her preference for such a girlish color. There was no gift card in the bouquet. She could not see the message or name. She casually picked up the exquisite small bag by the side. After opening it, she saw that it was a square gift box. When she opened it again, she saw that it was a white, handmade, luxury watch box. Until she saw that it was Van Cleef & Arpels' latest pink ladies' watch. When Jean Wan saw the design on the watch, her expression immediately turned ugly. There was a card in the box. When she flipped it over, she saw several lines of black handwriting. Van Cleef & Arpels' Lover's Bridge, the most romantic watch in the world. The boy showed the minutes, and the girl showed the hours. As the minutes and seconds approached, the boy anxiously counted the minutes, and the girl calmly counted the hours. Finally, when it was close to midnight, they could hug each other for a minute. "Good luck, my girl." There was no signature or name on the entire card. But this was Xing Yihan's handwriting. Jean Wan recognized it. A few years ago, she had seen his handwriting in the Ji family. Later, when Xia Tian was hospitalized, she had also seen Xing Yihan's diagnosis and medical records. What a beautiful watch. Little Eight was surprised, and when he saw the logo, he said with stars in his eyes, "Oh my God. It was actually this brand. Super expensive." Before Xiaobo finished speaking, she was surprised to see Jin Wan casually throw the large bouquet of roses into the wastebasket and then push the box of watches out. "You like it? You can have it." 3 drops of sweat rolled down her forehead. This was such an expensive thing. How could she dare to accept it? Jin Wan looked at the watch box on the table and fell silent. A few days ago, she had just gone back to expose Shinharu. Today, Xing Yihan suddenly sent her flowers and a gift. What did he mean by this? Was he using this method to greet her from afar? Or was it a declaration of war? Was he reminding her that he was unhappy that she had ruined his plans? Was he deliberately sending her this so-called lover's bridge to keep her at bay? The entire office was filled with the fragrance of roses. Jin Wan was originally not affected by these things. After a while, she abruptly stood up and walked out. She opened the door and called Xiaobo back. "Take the flowers out and throw them away. Spray some air freshener in the office. Call me when the smell has dissipated." After speaking, he walked out. Xiaobo was dumbstruck. Even now, she did not know who had sent the flowers and gifts. She also did not know why Jin Wan was not happy at all after receiving these things. Instead, it was as though she had eaten a fly. She did not dare to tarry. She returned to the office and followed Jin Wan's instructions to clean up the flowers. She then put on some air freshener and opened the windows. She turned back to look at the watch box on the table. She felt that this thing was really too expensive. If Boss Nguyen was unhappy and asked her to take care of this thing, she would not know how to deal with it. Thus, she directly placed the watch box into Jin Wan's bag. She then clapped her hands with a relaxed expression and left the office. The result of Xiaobo's actions was that Jin Wan brought the watch home with her without knowing it. When she finally realized it, it was already after her shower. Mo Jingxin came from the bedroom next door. When he saw the bag Jin Wan had thrown by the bedside, he saw a white watch box inside. His deep, cold eyes darkened. He walked over with a cold, handsome face. When he approached, he saw the watch box in the bag. He took it out and saw that it was printed with Van Cleef and Arpels, the symbol of Lover's Bridge. It was a luxury brand owned by a famous French family of jewelry and watches. He took the watch out for a look. The sound of water in the bathroom had stopped. Jin Wan walked out while drying her hair. When she saw him and the watch in his hands, her footsteps paused. She stared at him and then at the watch. Her eyes were filled with obvious surprise. Why was this watch here? Didn't she ask Xiaobo to take care of it in the morning? Why did she bring it back? Jin Wan placed the towel on her head down. She suddenly felt awkward. The man's figure stood by the bedside. His heavy and cold gaze met hers for 3 to 4 seconds. Who gave it to you? Mo Jingxin asked softly. However, it was clear that there was no need for her to answer. He already knew the answer. After all, Feng Ling no longer dared to hide anything about Jin Wan. Jin Wan must have already told him about the gift she received today. Although she did not intentionally bring this watch back, under his gaze, Jin Wan still felt that it was a huge mistake not to open the window and throw the watch out of Jin Lin building. Seeing that Mo Jingxin was still staring at her, Jin Wan scratched her hair. Things like receiving gifts are usually one-sided. Furthermore, I didn't intend to bring this thing back. Back then, I wanted to have someone throw it out, but, Mo Jingshan calmly cut her off. Answer. Jin Wan. It was Xing Yihan. Chapter 186. I didn't want to keep it. You can't blame me. My assistant probably saw that the watch was too expensive and didn't dare to throw it away, so he stuffed it into my bag. I didn't notice it before I came back, Jin Wan explained helplessly. Mo Jingshan looked at her for a moment and did not speak. He threw the pink watch into the trash can. Jin Wan did not even look at the watch, thinking that it was fine to throw it away. It suited her. Anyway, she really didn't want to keep Xing Yihan's things. At this time, Mo Jingshan received a call from the company and turned to enter the study. 10 minutes later. The door to the study was opened again. The man came out expressionlessly and then dug out the watch from the trash can. He held the watch and walked out. What are you doing? Jin Wan asked in confusion. When Jin Wan walked out, she saw that Auntie Chin had brought up a cup of water. Mo Jingshan saw it and casually threw the watch into the cup. Steam rose from the cup. Silently, the time on the watch was fixed at 9:00 p.m. The boy and girl in the watch were at an untouchable distance. From now on, they could no longer approach each other. Auntie Chin held the cup with a surprised expression. She did not understand what was going on. Because Jin Wan's body was cold, she would bring up a cup of water at this time every day. When it was no longer so hot, she would let Jin Wan drink it. She promised to let her drink a cup of warm water every day. But today, Jin Wan stood by the door, the corner of her lips twitching. Once and for all. This method was indeed Mo Jingshan's. A watch of this price was not afraid of water or falling, but it was afraid of boiling water. Mr. Mo. Auntie Chin stared at the cup in a daze. This watch. Throw it out. Mo Jingshan's tone was cold. Auntie Chin nodded. Anyway, this cup of water could not be drunk. She took it downstairs quickly and planned to pour another cup and bring it up. Before Mo Jingshan returned to the room, he glanced at Jin Wan. What are you looking at? You can't bear to. Jin Wan chuckled. After all, it was urgent for her to go to Tea City. She could not provoke him at this time. Of course I can bear to. I wanted to throw it out during the day, she said as she followed him back to the room. After closing the door, Mo Jingshan saw that she seemed to have something to say and glanced at her indifferently. Smiling so obsequiously, are you afraid that I won't let you go to Tea City? Was there a need to always see through her like this? The corner of Jin Wan's mouth twitched. It's indeed about to start, since you've decided to go, just focus on your studies. Someone will arrange everything else for you. Mo Jingshan's tone was still unfriendly. He had clearly given in to her so-called grand goal and desire, but it was clear that Xing Yihan's blatant provocation made it difficult for him to soften his tone. Really? Then I have to hand over all the projects in the studio as soon as possible. Several subordinates and assistants in my studio have gone to Xia Tian's place tonight. I'll have a video conference with them tonight and explain it well. Looking at Mo Jingshan's unhappy face, Jin Wan stepped forward to hold his arm with a pleading expression. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at her. Seeing that she did not show any emotions due to Xing Yihan's matter, he calmly said, "The computer is on. Go." Jin Wan glanced at the time. It was almost time for the meeting with Xia Tian and the rest. Seeing that Mo Jingshan was planning to let her off, she did not argue with her. She suddenly smiled and hugged his neck, pulling him down. She forced him to lower his head and planted a kiss on the corner of his lips. After kissing him, she was afraid that he would turn around and throw her onto the bed. She slipped out of his embrace and quickly turned to enter the study. Jin-won sat in front of the computer, having a video conference with Xia Tian and the rest. According to the schedule, they would be leaving for T-City the day after tomorrow. Although the 3 months of study would pass in the blink of an eye, the studio was currently in the development stage. Everything was her blood, sweat, and tears. She had to explain it well. As Mo Jingshan often had video conferences with overseas partners, the video camera on the computer in his study was very high definition. From the screen on Xia Tian's side, Jin-won seemed to be sitting opposite them. During the meeting, Xia Tian held the proposal that Xiao Ba handed to her. Don't worry. In the next 3 months, I'll definitely help you secure the #1 sales position in High City's real estate industry. I've seen the land and properties you've acquired and the series of plans you're about to carry out. You really have a good eye. You've already laid these cornerstones. I don't need to exert too much effort. As long as you can safely and steadily hold the current ones in the studio, it will be enough. You have to have confidence in us. Jin-won supported her chin with one hand and looked at them. Of course I have confidence. High City's geographical location is also unique. I'm not in a hurry about sales. Now, the most important thing is the human resources department of the studio. Help me keep a close eye on the people recruited by the human resources department in the future. We don't need too many people, but we must use every one of them. Then they briefly discussed the room for improvement of the studio. Several colleagues who were at Xia Tian's home pointed out the small problems in the studio's operation and other aspects that were easily overlooked. Jin-won also seriously discussed with them how to increase the probability of converting the real estate and the current resources under the studio's name into liquid capital without any loss, and how to be more flexible. After a while, Xia Tian on the screen suddenly looked surprised, and Xiao Ba also suddenly looked at Jin-won with a startled expression. Jin-won looked at them in confusion and subconsciously turned back, but she didn't see when Mo Jingshan had entered the study. The man was holding the boiled water that Auntie Chen had brought in. Right now, the temperature of the water was just right. He stood there, and the warm light in the study was reflected on the glass in his hand. He didn't seem to want to interrupt her ongoing meeting. However, at this moment, the people on the other side of the computer were staring straight at him. Xiao Ba suddenly exclaimed, "In my lifetime, I've actually seen CEO Mo in real life." Jin-won, dash. Chapter 187. That man who only needed to stand there quietly to attract everyone's attention was really the living Mo Jingshan. She had always heard of his name but never seen him. Jin-won was usually low-key and would never specially let Mo Jingshan appear in the studio. At this moment, the people on the other side of the computer were staring at him like wolves and tigers. Mo Jingshan's expression was calm. He walked over, placed the glass by Jin-won's hand, and then glanced at the proposal displayed on her computer screen. "You came at the right time. Help me take a look at these places." Jin-won hurriedly pointed at the screen. "These are the areas we are considering to develop, but because the previous 2 companies of the studio have not performed well, many friendly companies are only cooperating with the studio for the sake of Mo Corporation. Except for the BGY Group a few days ago, the rest are still in the wait-and-see stage, so the concentration and popularity of these projects are not very optimistic." Jin-won nodded and said, "You're right." Speaking up to this point, Jin-won turned to Mo Jingshan. "In fact, I can understand. Right now, the property market is indeed not very optimistic. Coupled with the studio's previous performance, if it weren't for your intervention, I'm afraid we would be a group of children with no one to care about us. So now we have to go through the invisible obstacles." Xia Tian could not hold it in any longer and suddenly said, "CEO Mo. The one who has to overcome the obstacles step by step is your family's Jean Wan, not me. She's so concerned about her face that she has to suffer. There are many things that she is unwilling to ask for your help with. Look, right now, we just want you to help us draw a few key points and choose a few projects for us. She can't even ask for such a small request. Xia Tian tapped her fingers on the computer table and ignored Jean Wan's glare. She continued to say, you have to know that in the next few months, this studio will be under my management. My leg is still crippled. CEO, please be kind and give us some advice, so that we don't have to take a detour, and we can all be at ease. Jean Wan can also rest assured. You don't want her to worry about things here every day when she's away to study, do you? Mo Jingshan did not look at the people on the computer screen. He only indifferently glanced at the little woman who was sitting in front of the computer and drinking water with an awkward expression. He opened his mouth, and there was a hint of gentleness and indulgence in his indifferent tone. Briefly repeat what you just discussed. Jean Wan was about to put down the glass of water she had just taken a sip of, but Xiao Ba, who was sitting opposite her, eagerly took the information in her hand and began to give a brief account. Because she had already given the information, Xiao Ba's words were clear and orderly, and perhaps because the other party was Mo Jingshan, Xiao Ba didn't dare to say any nonsense and spoke concisely. After speaking, Xiao Ba looked up with admiration and said carefully, CEO Mo, do you need me to show you the details of the plan again? Thank you for your hard work. No need. Mo Jingshan calmly said. His gaze had already landed on the page of the plan on Jean Wan's computer screen. He bent down and placed his hand on Jean Wan's. She was currently holding the mouse, and he held her hand and clicked on the mouse several times. He flipped through several pages of the plan and saw the plan inside. A moment later, Mo Jingshan lowered his gaze and watched Jean Wan's face illuminated by the computer screen. He looked at her exceptionally serious expression and chuckled softly. His tone was slightly indifferent and filled with indescribable doting. Circle the fifth item on the third page. For the next month, focus on this project. Jean Wan immediately flipped the plan back to the page he had mentioned and focused on it. As expected, this piece of land was purchased by me at the end of last month. Right now, High Cities Tourism Bureau is planning to develop this area into a tourism development zone. I originally planned to suppress this area for a period of time, but the Tourism Bureau has sent out many people to interfere with the price of the land nearby. Thus, this area should be regulated and can't be suppressed any longer. We should stop while we're ahead. As Mo Jingshan helped her highlight the key points of this project, he marked all the areas that included the predicted price increase. His meaning was clear and also gave her a hint. Is it because you have someone in the city's tourism bureau and know that they will only release the regulation policy in a month, so you want me to suppress it for at most another month? Jean Wan asked. Mo Jingshan, yes. It was just a single word. He said it lightly, yet it was as it should be. This was a very simple logic. Even if Jean Wan had the ability to predict the future 10 years from now, she could not do everything perfectly. On the other hand, Mo Jingshan's status was different. In this enormous high city, regardless of whether it was the business or political world, he had a certain amount of connections. He could obtain the most direct and accurate plans in advance, and it was many times more effective than her so-called prediction ability. Thus, a man like him was truly terrifying. Not to mention turning back time by 10 years, even if he was thrown into the torrent of history, he would still be able to control everything. He could always look at the entire situation and stand at the top of the pyramid. When Mo Jingshan helped her highlight the key points, he gave her a concise and comprehensive analysis. Jean Wan listened attentively. In the study, only their voices could be heard. The video was on the entire time. Xia Tian, Xiao Ba, and the others could be described as absolutely quiet. Wasn't the legendary Mo Jinxian aloof, cold, and unreasonable? But right now, the dignified CEO Mo did not pay any attention to anyone on the computer ever since he entered the study. His eyes were only focused on Jean Wan, and they were vaguely filled with warmth and patience. Even when Jean Wan's thoughts coincided with his, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. How was this the cold and aloof CEO Mo? He was clearly a top-quality, warm man who was like a rare treasure, but it was clear that this treatment was only for Jean Wan alone. As for the others, they were not even worthy of his attention. After Mo Jinxian finished highlighting and analyzing the key points, Jean Wan simply sat in front of the computer to carefully rearrange the information that had been highlighted. Mo Jinxian rubbed her head twice and did not say anything more, turning to leave. So envious, so blissful, what should I do? I want to fall in love. This is practically a royal level of dog food. As the study door was closed, the computer finally began to resound with voices. Even Xia Tian could not help but click her tongue. Not bad, Jean Wan. Sure enough, today is different from the past. Even the dog food of the century has been stuffed into my hands. Jean Wan earnestly typed as she said, earlier on, the key points that he mentioned. Did you all hear it? I'll edit the documents here and send them to you. Let's continue talking about this. Chapter 188. However, what caused them to break down was that the royal level of dog food did not end here. After a while, Jean Wan's meeting had yet to end. Furthermore, it was already late at night, and the main points had already been drawn. The women chatted about the studio while chattering about various unrelated topics. A colleague sitting by Xia Tian's side suddenly teased, "Boss, our studio was invested in by Mo Corporation. When are we going to invite CEO Mo to our studio for an inspection?" That's right, that's right. That's right. Let's not look at CEO Mo through the screen. The women began to make a fuss again. Even Xia Tian joined in and teased her. Just as Jean Wan was trying her best to maintain a stern expression and was about to continue the meeting with a calm expression, the door to the study opened again. Mo Jinxian's voice came from the door. "Do you want to drink milk?" As Mo Jinxian's voice landed, the several heads on the computer screen nodded in unison. Their faces were filled with anticipation as though the person Boss Missouri had asked was them. Jean Wan glanced at the water that she had barely drunk earlier. If she did not drink something hot tonight, Mo Jinxian would most likely not let it go. She nodded. A moment later, Mo Jinxian brought her a cup of warm milk. He softly instructed her to drink it while it was hot and to rest early. He then left and did not return. After that, the meeting continued. Every time Jean Wan picked up the cup of milk to drink, the several pairs of eyes on the computer screen would stare at her. "I want to drink milk too. I don't care. I'm going downstairs to buy it right now." "Me too. Me too. No matter how I try, the milk I buy won't taste as good as the one Boss Missouri personally brings. In order to lose weight, I didn't even eat at night. Now, I'm soaking in plain water and milk. I'm about to explode, envy, jealousy, and hate. I really want to have a man like CEO Mo to kiss, hug, and hold up high every day." Jean Wan listened to their nagging and decided to gulp down the milk in the cup. She then placed the cup down heavily and said with a calm and serious expression, "Continue the meeting." Jean Wan had lived in High City for many years. Ever since she was young, aside from studying in America for a few years, she had never left High City. When they were about to leave for T-City, Ji Hongwen was busy with trivial matters at the Ji Corporation and couldn't find time to send Jean Wan off. He only sent someone from his family to bring some things for her and called to inform them. When he learned that Mo Jinxian would personally send Jean Wan over, he was relieved. It was already winter in High City, and everything was frozen. T-City was located in the south, so it was only slightly colder than summer. When he got off the plane, it was already early evening in T-City and it was drizzling. Jin-won wanted to say that she could just take a taxi to T-University. After all, Mo Jingshin had been particularly busy these past 2 days. He had compressed his work for the next few days to be completed in the first 2 days. Today was the same. Originally, he had an important meeting at 3 in the afternoon. It had been scheduled for several days, but it just so happened to coincide with the time he was supposed to send Jin-won to T-City. Last night, Mo Jingshin had informed his subordinates and pushed the meeting forward to 10 in the morning. Mo Corporation had several branches in T-City. When Jin-won stepped out of the airport hall, she realized that there was already a car waiting outside. "When are you returning to High City?" After getting on the car, Jin-won glanced at the time. She did not know how long Mo Jingshin would be accompanying her here. "Tomorrow morning at 7. Mo Jingshin responded, speaking softly. "I've arranged a place for you near T-University. I'll send your luggage there first and accompany you to buy some daily necessities. If there's anything else you need, remember to give Auntie Chin a call and have her send it over." It was already past 8 in the evening. There were less than 11 hours left before they would be parting. His plane was at 7 tomorrow morning, which meant that he had to leave at least 2 hours in advance. Adding in the numbers, there were only a few hours left before they would be parting. "Fong Ling will arrive in T-City before noon tomorrow. She'll go directly to your place." He saw that Jin-won kept looking at the time. It was clear that she was reluctant to part with him, but she refused to say it. He pinched her face. "Are you sure you want to stay here? Since I'm already here, there's no need for me to think too much. I thought that Fong Ling would have to take a break for the next few months. Actually, I'll be spending most of my time in T-University. There's no need for her to come over." Mo Jingshin's expression was calm, but his tone was undeniable. "I'm leaving you alone in T-City. From the looks of it, you want to return to High City with me." Jin-won, forget it. With Fong Ling by her side, she could indeed avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble. "When did you arrange a place for me? I heard that T-University's dormitory environment isn't bad. I originally planned to stay in the dormitory. If you stay in the dormitory, I'm afraid I won't be able to casually warm your bed." Jin-won, who wanted him to warm her bed, She clearly wanted to be a proper student. All right, Jin-won's residence near T-University was much better than she had imagined. It was a well-equipped condominium with more than 200 square meters of space. "I'm living in such a large house alone, and I'm here to study. The amount of time I can come back to stay is very little. This is too much of a waste." Jin-won walked one round around the condominium. When she came out, she saw that Mo Jingshin had also entered. "Even if you can only come back for an hour a week, I can't let my Mrs. Mo suffer." Mo Jingshin pushed the suitcase in his hands. The silver suitcase immediately ran to the wall and stood firmly against it. Even the movement of pushing the suitcase was so handsome. This man, faced with the impending separation, Jin-won suddenly suspected that he was intentionally seducing her. She immediately ran to the kitchen to take a look. Everything had really been prepared for her. Everything that could be used was there. There was basically no need for her to buy too many things. She then opened the fridge. It was already filled with various fresh fruits and ingredients. She took them out to take a look at the date on the packaging. They had all been sent over today. "You're returning to High City tomorrow. I'm guessing that I won't be able to eat a meal you personally made for several months." Jin-won suddenly clasped her hands together and looked at him. Her expression was expectant as she said, do you want to make me another delicious meal tonight? To satisfy my stomach. Mo Jingshan did not even bat an eyelid. He calmly spat out 2 words, not doing it. Jin Wan. Why? I'm hungry right now. The man glanced at her with his inky eyes. Jin Wan walked over and was about to pull him into the kitchen. She wanted to coax and persuade him to show off his skills once more. Chapter 189. The lights in the room were not turned on, and only a faint moonlight shone through. Jin Wan was directly brought in by him and was almost pushed into the bedroom. A new environment, a new bedroom, a new bed. Everything was unfamiliar, causing one to be especially sensitive. She welcomed the man's kiss, and her body instantly ignited. Her eyes blurred as she hugged the man on top of her. Her voice trembled as she said, "I haven't eaten yet." The man's movements did not stop. He said in a heavy voice, "I'll eat first today." With that, Mo Jingshan turned over and covered her body. She let out a low, "Aw." Because of his movements, she subconsciously closed her legs, but she couldn't stop him at all. His hand traced the extremely sensitive part of her waist. It was slightly itchy and numb to the bone. Jin Wan quickly felt something hot and hard pressing against her. She was about to ask him to be gentler when the man suddenly kissed her on the lips. "It'll be your birthday in half a month. Go back to High City to celebrate your birthday, and I don't know how my classes will progress by then. If there's no time, then don't celebrate your birthday." She had yet to finish speaking when the man actually entered without any warning. Hearing her suppressed low cry, the man's lips curled into a victorious smile. "You have to go back." He lowered his voice by her lips, and it was unexpectedly forceful and domineering. Just like the movement of his lower body, she could not avoid it. "The first birthday after our marriage, we'll go back to High City to celebrate, remember? What if there's an exam or some other activity, and the professor doesn't let me go back? The classes here are only 3 months long. I think we should not go back." His movements became more ruthless, and each thrust became deeper and harder than the last. Jin Wan had already been on the plane for an entire afternoon, and right now, she could barely keep up. After being bullied so harshly and heavily, she could not even speak properly. She could only hoarsely whimper. "Don't, aw. I'll try my best, alright, good girl." He finally kissed her lips in satisfaction, but the force of his lower body did not lessen. What could be more frustrating than being pressed down on the bed by the great boss Missouri for close to 2 hours, when one was so tired and hungry that they wanted nothing more than to lie down on the bed and sleep through the night. Yet, one still had to get out of bed and go to the nearby supermarket to buy something. Although there were ingredients at home, they were not complete. Thankfully, when they arrived at the supermarket, Mo Jingshan generously allowed her to eat at a Chinese restaurant in front of the entrance. But even if she was full, her entire body had just been devoured by him not long ago. Her legs were still sore when she left the house, and her calves trembled as she walked. If it weren't for the fact that Mo Jingshan's flight was tomorrow morning and he could only accompany her to buy things tonight, she really wanted to bite him to death. She lived near T University, and there were many people in the supermarket near the university. Jin Wan pushed the shopping cart, checking to see if there was anything missing. When she raised her eyes, she saw Mo Jingshan standing not far in front of her. He held a heat pack in his hand. His fingers were long and slender, and his skin color was much cleaner than most men's. It was a stark contrast to the red heat pack. He was currently looking at several different brands on the shelves and asking the shop assistant about the differences. Every time Jin Wan's period came, her stomach would hurt. She had always had a cold body when she was young, so her stomach would hurt more than most people during those few days of the month. However, she often endured it and did not say anything. She would only drink more hot water to relieve the pain. She did not expect that Immerse would actually help her choose something like a heat pack from the supermarket. She pushed the shopping cart over and approached him. This man truly possessed all the qualities that attracted others. Most of the girls who passed by were students from the nearby area. When their gazes landed on him, they revealed various kinds of admiration and curiosity. Today, Immerse did not wear a suit. He did not appear as cold and unapproachable as he usually did in the company. Today, he was dressed casually. Although he was low-key and gentle, people like him would always stand out in the crowd. As Jin-won approached, she saw that he was politely asking the shop assistant about the usage of the heat packs. His voice was low and pleasant to the ears. In this ordinary supermarket, he seemed to have put on a different temperament. He was as warm as jade and had an otherworldly aura. Even though Jin-won and he were already very close and had just been intimate on the bed at home, Jin-won still couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. But at this moment, she still couldn't tear her eyes away. This man. Yes, it was really beautiful. He had never felt that time passed so quickly. When he returned from the supermarket, it was already late at night. After tidying up the things they bought, Immerse fulfilled her wish. Although they had a casual dinner outside, he still made her some supper. After eating her fill, Jin-won saw the man sitting on the sofa in the living room. She glanced at the time. There were only 4 hours left before he left for the airport. She leaned over to say, "Let's watch TV together." Immerse glanced at her. The little woman was clearly tired, but she insisted on not going to sleep. His elegant brows moved as he calmly said, "Come here." Jin-won sat by his side, passing the remote control to him. "What do you want to watch? Financial news or a foreign television station?" "I rarely watch TV. Whatever you like, you can change it yourself." Immerse held the little woman by his side, caressing her soft, smooth hair. "If you're tired, go to sleep. There's no need to accompany me here." Jin-won glanced at him. In the end, she could not bear to sleep. She sat by his side, switching on the television and changing several channels. As she did so, she asked, "Do you want to watch a variety show?" "Anything is fine." As for what to watch, Immerse did not have any objections. In the end, the so-called variety show was just a few popular male stars in the country acting coquettishly on stage. They were even better at showing off than women. From time to time, they would wink seductively and show off their abs. Jin-won watched with great interest. He casually picked up the remote control and changed the channel. "Watch something else." "Oh." Jin-won was confused. "Then how about watching a movie?" Jin-won switched to a movie channel. In the movie, the male lead was whispering sweet nothings to the female lead. Jin-won's eyes brightened. She suddenly pointed at the handsome face on the screen. This man seems to be a senior who was 2 years older than me when I was studying in America. Back then, I heard that he wanted to be an artist. I didn't expect that he would actually act in a movie. And he's even the main lead. His acting skills aren't bad. He's also much more handsome than before." Immerse was expressionless. "His acting skills are average. Change the channel." Jin-won, she glanced at him. "I feel that it's quite good. Not good, change the channel." Chapter 190. Although Jin-won wanted to continue watching, she saw that Immerse was clearly very dissatisfied with this movie. In the past, he had never been so picky about her taste. However, no matter how she looked at the channel, none of them were good. Her entire mind was focused on the passing time. She felt that every minute and every second was making her heart tighten little by little. Back then, she had shamelessly boasted that it was only 3 months. Now, let alone 3 months, she felt that even waiting for her birthday half a month later was too slow. She did not know what was being shown on the television. She casually switched channels and leaned her head on Mo Jingshan's shoulder. The room was very quiet. The lights were all off, and only the television's light and sound could be heard. After an unknown period of time, the unknown movie had already finished broadcasting. Mo Jingshan shifted his gaze from the television screen to Jin Wan's face. He looked at the little woman who had fallen asleep in his arms. Previously, when they were eating supper, Jin Wan had mentioned that recently, she had been eating and sleeping exceptionally well. If she continued to maintain this state in T-City, she would most likely become a round fatty by the time she returned to High City. She was already so skinny. It was impossible to hope for her to become a round fatty, but being able to eat and sleep was also good. Mo Jingshan gently raised her head, stood up, and carried her up by the waist. He carried her back to the bedroom and placed her on the bed. T-City. Jin Wan took the opportunity to visit the professor before the classes began. The professor's surname was Lin. Not only was he very good at teaching business management, he could also be considered an old acquaintance of her father. After greeting Professor Lin, she also learned that all the students accepted by Professor Lin were extraordinary. Most of the students he took in were the heirs of Chinese companies in China and abroad, or the senior managers of some famous groups. Because everyone did not have much time, they could only squeeze their time into these few months. The schedule for classes and exams was very tight. To save time, the professor suggested that Jin Wan stay in school as much as possible. T University had a special VIP dormitory. After Mo Jingshan returned to High City, Jin Wan stayed alone in such a large condominium. Although she did not lack anything, whenever she slept, she would always think of the night Mo Jingshan stayed here. In the end, she still chose to move to the school dormitory. The business department's VIP dormitory was on the 6th floor. It was separated from the normal students' dormitory and had plenty of sunlight. However, it was still a school environment. No matter what, resources were limited, and the best was a 4-person dormitory. When Jin Wan pushed open the door and entered, she saw a girl around her age sitting on the bed talking on the phone. All kinds of branded products, cell phones, and computers were thrown on the bed. She was focused on talking on the phone and did not tidy up anything. It was clear that she was a pampered young lady. Jin Wan had left most of her things in the condominium. She only brought the smallest suitcase with her. She only brought a simple introduction and could bring it back to the condominium to retrieve it. She could use to bring it back any time. She had just sat down by her bed when another person walked in. This person was around 25 or 26 years old. She was dressed fashionably and appeared slightly mature. Her actions were straightforward and efficient. After entering the room, she greeted Jin Wan and the person inside and introduced herself. She said that she was the vice president of Hengyun Corporation and that her name was Bai Wei. She had come here to further her studies. After a simple self-introduction, she carried her luggage to her bed and began to pack. She did not say a single word of nonsense. The girl on the phone put down the phone after another 10 minutes. She looked at the two of them and realized that her bed was really messy. She then began to tidy it up lazily. She placed a bunch of expensive cosmetics and skincare products on the public table. They were all international brands, and even the cheapest one was from Aquamarine Mystery, which cost more than 2,000 yuan. Hey, how did you guys clean up so quickly? The girl tidied up her makeup and looked at their clean bed and table enviously. Jin Wan glanced at her small suitcase. I don't have many things. The girl glanced at Jean Wan and raised her brows. She then turned to look at Bai Wei on the other bed. Seeing that the skincare products Bai Wei had brought out were not cheap, she directly asked, "Your body smells so good." You're using the C family's latest perfume from last month, right? And it was the limited edition one. I went to France and asked people to queue for a long time, but they couldn't buy it. You actually have it. Bai Wei glanced at her and casually responded before continuing to tidy up. It was clear that she was not in the mood to talk too much with this kind of noisy rich young lady. Seeing that she was ignoring her, the girl could only turn to look at Jean Wan. "Why did you bring so few things?" "That's right, earlier she said her name was Bai Wei." "Which company's vice president is she from?" Bai Wei casually replied, "Hengyun Corporation." "Oh, that's right, Hengyun Corporation. I've heard of this company before. It's the largest technology company in T-City. I think it's been listed for a long time, hasn't it?" The girl then said, "My father is the chairman of the Ling Group Bank. 50% of the Ling Group Bank's shares in the country belong to my family. I'm Ling Feifei." As she spoke, Ling Feifei turned to look at Jean Wan. "What about you?" Jean Wan was silent for a moment before replying, "I'm in charge of a real estate studio in High City." Jean Wan. The moment Ling Feifei heard this, she immediately lost interest in Jean Wan's gaze. She casually asked, "Studio? That investment shouldn't be much, right?" She was just short of saying how a small character like Jean Wan, who could not even be seen in public, could be accepted as Professor Lin's student. "But since you're from High City, do you know of the MO Corporation?" Ling Feifei did not have much interest in Jean Wan, whose identity could not be seen in public. However, it was clear that she had an indescribable yearning for the MO Corporation. As she spoke these words, her eyes shone. But then again, who in High City doesn't know of the MO Corporation? Ling Feifei sat there and said, "I'm sure you've only heard of it. It's such a pity. It's so rare to meet someone from High City, but it's actually from a small studio." Jean Wan. Ling Feifei realized that she had spoken too quickly. She suddenly smiled awkwardly at Jean Wan. What I meant was, a company like the MO Corporation usually wouldn't cooperate with a small studio like this. I was just saying. Please don't take it to heart." Jean Wan's brows moved slightly as she smiled. "I don't mind." Chapter 191. I usually only use a bottle of water. Jean Wan pointed at the small items she had placed by her pillow. Among them was a light green glass bottle. Ling Feifei glanced at it but could not recognize the brand. "What brand is this? How much is it?" "I forgot. I think it's around 600 yuan. Ling Feifei was shocked. "Only 600 yuan. Ling Feifei glanced at the moisturizer in her hands that was worth more than 10,000 yuan. Suddenly, she did not wish to speak to Jean Wan anymore. Bai Wei, who had not interjected earlier, suddenly spoke up. "I often use Jean Wan's moisturizer as well. People with especially good skin usually only use this." Ling Feifei pursed her lips and did not speak. However, it was clear that she was already extremely unhappy that Professor Lin had arranged for her to share a dormitory with someone without status and money. She was just holding it in. Jean Wan could see the disdain in this young lady's expression. She did not speak and only smiled at Bai Wei. Professor Lin had said that the majority of the students this time were young masters and young ladies with good family backgrounds and had their eyes set on the top of their heads. Furthermore, the class would only last for a short 3 months. Before they could understand each other, it would end. Thus, there was no need for her to reveal her trump card. Ling Feifei's luggage was truly too much. She could not fit all of it in her room, so she placed the other suitcase on the empty bed by the side. There should only be 3 people in this dormitory, right? Ling Feifei asked as she placed it. She had yet to finish her words when the door to the dormitory opened once more. Another young girl entered. The girl was dressed in a white dress. After entering, she glanced inside. Her gaze finally landed on Jean Wan, who was closest to the door. "Hello, I'm sorry I'm late. There should still be a place for me in the dormitory, right?" Bai Wei and Jean Wan simultaneously glanced toward the bed occupied by Ling Feifei's luggage. Ling Feifei's expression was clearly unhappy. However, under the gazes of the 3 of them, she could only place the luggage down and turn to her own bed. The girl who had just come in walked up to the bed and looked at Jean Wan, who was looking at her cell phone in the next bed. "Hello, my name is Su Shui. In the next 3 months, we'll sleep next to each other like this. Let's make friends." Jean Wan raised her eyes from her phone and glanced at Su Shui on the bed next door. Seeing that she was smiling brightly, Jean Wan nodded. This Su Shui seemed to be about the same age as Jean Wan, but she had an innocent and naive look, which easily made people let down their guard. Classes would officially start tomorrow, and the 4 people in the dormitory were all present. It was inevitable that they would have to introduce themselves again. Su Shui seemed to like talking to Jean Wan very much. Just now, she sat on Jean Wan's bed and exchanged phone numbers with her. When it was Su Shui's turn to introduce herself, she smiled and said, "I'm from Los Angeles in America. My family has all kinds of businesses, and one of the more famous ones is a Chinese company in Los Angeles, Swan Group. My father holds 60% of the shares." Hearing the word Swan Group, the arrogant Ling Feifei suddenly took several glances at Su Shui. Her arrogant expression changed, as though she had finally found a roommate who was worthy of living in the same dormitory as her. "You're actually from America. Aren't there many outstanding lecturers overseas? Why did you come to our country to study business management?" Su Shui smiled. "After all, my family is a Chinese company. I still need to understand the local culture. My family has some relatives in T-City. They suggested that I come here, so I came." After that, they chatted for a while. Jean Wan would occasionally reply, but because Jean Wan's identity was too ordinary, Ling Feifei, that chatterbox, spent the entire time currying favor with Su Shui and Bai Wei. She ignored Jean Wan and would occasionally ask a question, but it was clear that she was not interested in her. Jean Wan was also happy to be left alone. Not long later, Feng Ling gave Jean Wan a call and asked her if she wanted to eat dinner in T University or go out. The dormitory was filled with Ling Feifei's fervent chatter. It was too noisy, so she naturally chose to go out. Jean Wan had just left the dormitory when Su Shui followed her out. "Jean Wan. It's already dark. Where are you going?" Jean Wan glanced at her. "I'll be back after eating dinner. Do you have something to do?" Hearing this, Su Shui moved closer to her side and held her arm, speaking intimately, "Then let's go eat together. This is our first time in T-City and we're unfamiliar with this place. It's good to have companions." Jean Wan's lips curved, her smile was mild. It was not that she was cold, but Su Shui's sudden familiarity made her feel that something was amiss. "We'll eat together another day. I have an appointment with a friend tonight." "All right, then. Let's go together tomorrow." Su Shui followed her persistently. "We'll talk about it tomorrow." Before Jean Wan stepped out of the dormitory, she saw that Su Shui was still looking at her. She turned to look at her again, asking, "Earlier on, you said that you came from Los Angeles?" Su Shui smiled and nodded. "That's right." Jean Wan smiled deeply and said meaningfully, "Not bad. It's really a city that makes one yearn to go to." Su Shui's expression was startled for a moment. "Yearn? You've never been to Los Angeles?" Jean Wan watched her expression without batting an eyelid. She raised her brows slightly. "Why? Should I have been there?" "No, I'm just surprised. Earlier on, I heard Fei Fei and the others mention that they had all gone to Los Angeles for a vacation. I thought you had been there too." Su Shui stared at her eyes for a moment before her sweet and harmless smile returned. Jean Wan smiled and glanced at the time. "I'm sorry, my friend is still waiting for me." Su Shui could only nod. Just as Jean Wan was about to leave, she suddenly asked, "It's already so late, and you're still going to eat dinner? You're leaving in such a hurry. Could the person waiting for you be your boyfriend?" Jean Wan did not reply. She raised her brows and looked at her with a slight smile. "What do you want to eat? Do you want me to pack it for you?" Su Shui's expression faltered. She then smiled and answered, "A portion of spaghetti. Thank you." After leaving T University, Feng Ling had been waiting for Jean Wan for a long time. The two of them casually ate at a Western restaurant near T University. Jean Wan cut the steak and glanced at Feng Ling, who was quietly eating her steak. "I want to ask you a few questions." "What?" "Have you heard of Los Angeles' Swan Group?" "Yes." Jean Wan's hands, which were holding onto the knife and fork, paused. "Then is there any special relationship between Swan Group and Shine Group? Or, is there any relationship between her and Imo Jingshan? Dash. Chapter 192. "It doesn't matter," Feng Ling replied, looking into Jean Wan's eyes. Their eyes met, and she was as honest as ever. Jean Wan paused. It didn't matter. If this was a question Feng Ling could not answer, Feng Ling would say that she did not know or remain silent. However, she directly said that it didn't matter. Based on Jean Wan's understanding of Feng Ling, she was certain that she was speaking the truth. Could it be that she was thinking too much? "Then have you heard of the name Su Shui?" Jean Wan asked. When Feng Ling heard the word Su, there was a moment of surprise in her eyes. However, when she heard the name behind it, she immediately shook her head. "No. All right, there's nothing else. Let's continue eating." Jean Wan did not speak further. Jean Wan was thinking that this Su Shui was indeed a naive person who liked to be friends with anyone she met. Or, Su Shui's real name was not these three words, and she had lied about her family background. However, these were all just conjectures. It seemed like she had to find time to take a photo with Su Shui in the next few days. She would bring the photo to Feng Ling to take a look. Perhaps, she might be able to find some answers. On the first day of classes, everything was in order. Professor Lin was indeed an experienced professor. His teaching style was also very suitable for young people. There were more than 40 students in this new class, both male and female. More than half of the students were female, and there weren't many male students. However, most of them were second-generation heirs and heirs of wealthy families. All of them were wealthy and respectable, and they couldn't be underestimated in the future. In the evening, after class, Jean Wan took her books and returned to the dormitory to revise. She had left all the work in the studio to Xia Tian before taking the time to come to T University. These 3 months were very precious to her. "You're so hardworking. It's only the first day. Everyone has gone to the entertainment club opposite T University. Aren't you going out for a drink or two?" When Bai Wei returned, she saw that Jean Wan was actually revising. Bai Wei was different from those pampered daughters of wealthy families. She was a senior executive in a company, and her words were very mature and straightforward. She did not like to be too close to Ling Feifei, but her impression of Jin Wan was quite good. She would occasionally chat with Jin Wan. I want to, but I can't. There's someone at home who doesn't allow me to drink. Jin Wan smiled at Bai Wei. She flipped through the book in her hands and furiously took notes. Not even wine. Why are you so strict? Bai Wei said casually. In the blink of an eye, she picked up a book and sat on the bed opposite and began to read. Jin Wan did not answer but raised her eyes to glance at her. Why don't you go? I'm not interested in participating in this kind of activity. They're just a bunch of pampered second-generation rich kids. There's no point in getting along with them, Bai Wei replied and did not say anything else. She lowered her head and continued reading. The dormitory was quiet except for the occasional sound of flipping pages. Jin Wan continued writing for a while. When she put down her pen to rest, she glanced at her phone on the table. She had no idea what the man who warned her not to touch a drop of alcohol was doing right now. She thought for a moment, suddenly picked up her phone, took a photo of the notes she had just written, and sent it to him. High City, MO Corporation. The black ghost came out of the company's underground parking lot and drove to the square in front. The sound of an incoming message came from his cell phone. Mo Jingshan usually ignored these messages, but at this moment, he took out his cell phone and glanced at it. Seeing that it was a message from Jin Wan, the black ghost drove to a spot with less traffic and stopped by the side of the road. He opened the message and saw that it was a basic business management class notebook. The neat and serious handwriting displayed the little woman's seriousness and diligence. His cell phone then rang again. A second message came in. Jin Wan, the first day of class. The first set of notes. Mr. Mo, please check. Mo Jingshan's eyes were filled with warmth as he called her. Jin Wan did not know if he was busy and did not dare to call. She was leaning against the table, preparing to send another message when the man's call came in. She was startled. She turned back to see that Bai Wei was still reading. Afraid that the call would disturb her, she rushed to grab her phone and ran out of the dormitory like a thief. Class is over. The man's calm and clear voice came from the phone. Although his tone was clearly no different from his usual tone, Jin Wan's heart was like the surging undercurrents of a calm lake. His simple words had caused her emotions to rise and fall. She only needed a moment of distraction to wish that she could immediately fly back to High City. And she softly responded. What is it? Why are you so depressed? Are you unhappy? No. Why didn't you wake me up when you went to the airport that day? When I suddenly woke up in the morning, it was already past 8 o'clock. The moment I opened my eyes, I saw that the room was empty. At that time, he was already on the plane. She could not call him. After the feeling of disappointment in her heart gradually calmed down, she held her breath. She was angry that he left without saying a word. Why did I wake you up? Tell you to hug me and cry. Jin Wan. Who said I would cry? The man's voice was cold. He smiled faintly. You don't need to cry. Just one look is enough to make me suffer. I'm afraid I'll regret it on the spot and directly kidnap you back to High City. Since Mo Jingshan could say these words, it proved that he was definitely capable of doing such a thing. However, at that time, if Jin Wan had watched him leave, she most likely would not have looked too happy. From time to time, students from other dormitories would pass by the corridor. Jin Wan lowered her voice and briefly explained the class is here to Mo Jingshan. As she spoke, she suddenly heard the sound of a car on the other end of the line. She asked, "Are you driving?" "No, the car is parked by the side of the road." Mo Jingshan calmly said, "I'm afraid I'll be distracted if I call Mrs. Mo, so I parked the car early." "I thought you were at the company or at home." Jin Wan finally realized that he had just gotten off work. From the sound of the car, she could guess that there was a traffic jam. If he continued to park there, it would be really inconvenient. She said, "You drive back first. I'll continue to take notes. I'll call later." And clearly, it wasn't good to keep the car parked there. He did not reject her. His voice was clear and low. "Don't read for too long. Take care of your eyes. Also, don't stay up late." I know. Don't worry. Even if you're not by my side to urge me, my lifestyle is still orderly. I'll definitely study well and live a healthy life." Jin Wan mischievously responded and hung up. She put down the phone and was about to return to the dormitory when she saw that Su Shui had returned. She was standing at the staircase in front of the corridor, looking in her direction thoughtfully. Chapter 193. Meeting Su Shui's gaze, Jin Wan withdrew the smile on her face and placed her phone in her pocket. She calmly glanced at her. "You didn't go with them to the club to play?" "I did, but I came back because there was nothing interesting." Su Shui finally raised an exquisite box in her hands. "Earlier, I bought a lot of desserts outside Tea University. Let's eat together." Jin Wan nodded and entered the dormitory. Without Ling Feifei, the dormitory was much quieter. Su Shui opened the dessert box and distributed the desserts to them. She then naturally sat by Jin Wan's bedside and ate the mousse cake in her hands as she tried to find topics to chat with Jin Wan. Most of the topics revolved around Jin Wan. One moment, she asked Jin Wan why she opened a studio related to real estate. The next moment, she asked Jin Wan what her family did aside from opening a studio. The next moment, she asked Jin Wan why she wanted to study business management. Finally, she casually asked, "Jin Wan, who were you talking to on the phone earlier? You were smiling so brightly. The person on the other side of the phone definitely wasn't your parents. It must be your boyfriend or something, right?" Jin Wan continued to hold the unfinished notes in her hands. As she read, she calmly said, "After asking so many questions, are you more curious about me or my so-called boyfriend?" As she spoke, Jin Wan's gaze shifted to Su Shui's face. Jin Wan's face carried a smile, but it also carried an unfathomable sense of distance. Su Shui blinked. "Since there's nothing to do, I'm just casually chatting. I have a cousin whom I've been close to since I was young. She's the same age as you. Perhaps it's because of this that I instinctively feel closer to you." Jin Wan raised her brows. "Cousin?" Su Shui nodded but did not continue on the topic of her so-called cousin. She only said, "Also, look, we've all introduced ourselves." Ling Feifei couldn't hide anything, and Bai Wei's company can be easily found online. You're the only one who said that you opened a studio in High City and didn't say anything else. I'm indeed very curious about you." Hearing these words, Bai Wei finally glanced at Jin Wan. "I indeed only have a studio. My background is simple and clean. There's nothing to be curious about." Jin Wan's tone was indifferent. She then glanced at Su Shui. "Speaking of which, aren't you, the young lady of the Swan Group who specially came from America, more worthy of my curiosity?" Su Shui immediately smiled bashfully. "I'm not that different from you guys. I just live a little further. Only." Jin Wan raised her brows. It seems like we're all the same. I live a little further. Jean Wan, I just want to get to know you better. I don't have many friends in the country, so I asked too many questions. Don't always keep me at a distance. Jean Wan did not speak. Bai Wei suddenly spoke up, everyone's personality is different. Jean Wan clearly doesn't wish to say more, yet you keep asking. Why can't you see this clearly? Su Shui's expression faltered. She thought for a moment and suddenly handed a few desserts to Jean Wan. All right, I won't ask anymore. I'll go read too. She stood up and returned to her own bed. Jean Wan glanced at the desserts Su Shui placed by her bed. She casually picked them up and handed them to Bai Wei. You eat them. Recently, I've lost interest in desserts. My stomach feels uncomfortable after just a few mouthfuls. I keep feeling nauseous. Bai Wei glanced at her and teased, what's there to feel nauseous about? Don't tell me you're pregnant. They didn't know each other very well, so her casual words were just a joke. Jean Wan just smiled at it. Su Shui's gaze abruptly shifted to Jean Wan. Sensing her gaze, Jean Wan could not help but turn to look at her. Don't you want to read? Su Shui paused. Her gaze shifted to her stomach. She picked up the book and asked thoughtfully, do you feel nauseous when you eat desserts? I'm joking. Jean Wan curved her lips and did not pay her any more attention. Half a month passed by quickly. Jean Wan had almost forgotten about her birthday. By the time she remembered, it was T University's annual bonfire party. The bonfire party was the day before her birthday. It was also the day Jean Wan had originally planned to book a plane ticket back to High City. It was said that not all students had the right to attend. Only students who had been selected by the professors and the school officials could attend the celebration. Jean Wan was preparing to book a plane ticket back to High City when she suddenly received a call from Professor Lin. Professor Lin said that among the new students under him, there were only 10 spots left for the bonfire party. One of them was her. He also said that this spot was difficult to obtain. Once it was confirmed, it could not be changed. Jean Wan could only agree. But this way, she would not be able to return to High City on her birthday. She had originally promised Mo Jingshan, but now that she had changed her mind, she did not know if he would be angered by her. Jean Wan held her phone in a daze for a moment before calling Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan picked up the call and heard the woman stammering on the other end. What are you feeling so guilty about? Can't you even have a proper conversation? Jean Wan could only speak honestly. Earlier, I received a call from Professor Lin. He arranged a spot for me for T University's annual bonfire party. Since I've already arranged it, I can't go. So, I can't return to High City on Saturday. You're not returning to High City this week? Mo Jingshan was in his office, flipping through the documents without raising his head. He spoke calmly into his phone, even if Professor Lin treats you as his favorite student, you can't snatch me away so blatantly. Do you plan on spending your 21st birthday with me in a house far apart from each other? It's not that, she actually wanted to go back. After so long, this was the first time she had been apart from Mo Jingshan for such a long time. She had long gotten used to working during the day and returning home at night to hug the other party. Now that they were forcibly separated, time had really slowed down. Mo Jingshan placed the documents in his hands down and loosened his collar. After a moment of silence, he asked, what bonfire party? Can't you be absent? The spots are limited. Professor Lin specially reserved a spot for me, and it's really hard to refuse. Once it's decided, it can't be changed. I'm thinking that if it really can't be done, I'll celebrate my birthday on the lunar calendar. I won't celebrate my birthday on the solar calendar. I'll go back next month. Professor Lin had given her so much face. She couldn't possibly reject his good intentions. Do we need to dress up for your bonfire party? There's no need. It's not like it's a banquet. Although Professor Lin's students are all from the upper class, there are many ordinary students in T University. This isn't the school's anniversary. It shouldn't be that grand. The entire student body of T University will be there. More or less, but there should be a limited number of spots. In total, there should only be a few hundred people. A few hundred. The man suddenly said coldly, there are only a dozen or so hedonistic young masters in Professor Lin's class. I've already endured enough to let them stay in the same classroom as you. Are you going to attend the bonfire party with a few hundred people? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.